TikTok, time to rock. Good. Are you still messing with your camera, man? Messing up my intro?
Yes.
Wearing what is that, a green rapper's jumpsuit from like 1988?
Pretty much, yeah. You pretty much nailed it. Exactly. It's, what's it called? Velour?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. We got the gold medallion and everything, man.
Yeah, it's stainless steel, of course.
Can't tell if it's a rapper thing or mafia thing.
Fat Italian thing, definitely.
Hey, how you doing, man?
How you doing? I'm doing great, man. I appreciate.
Bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate being here, and I appreciate everyone being patient. And I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Hey, I told you about that time me and Nabil were outside the Italian restaurant.
What happened?
Remember that?
I don't know.
We were on a trip. This is when he was still a Muslim. We were taking a trip. I forget where, Maryland or something like that. We're with friends and stuff. And we stop. We're looking for a place to eat. We find this nice Italian restaurant. And we're out, and it looked like something had just finished, some event, because there were all these people standing outside in suits and stuff. Yeah. And I go, hey, Nabil, watch this. And I go, hey, Tony! And like 5 guys turned around, like I was talking to them. Yeah, that's
pretty awful.
That was pretty funny. Yep, but anyway, lots of guys named Tony out there.
Well, there's a joke about that. Why are so many Italian guys named Tony? So they would know when they're going. When they come over on the boat, they stamp 2NY on their forehead.
Well, that is some seriously racist stuff.
Yeah.
That is some serious racist stuff there. All right. Well, we're going to be talking about Muhammad's plagiarism. Why, in the name of common sense, are you interested in this topic?
Well, it's weird how it went this way. I don't know if you saw this movie, The Book of Clarence, came out.
No.
John McCrae reviewed it. I'm sure you watch all his videos.
No.
Our friend? What do you mean?
Yeah, he's my friend. I do not watch all his videos on movies.
So he did a review of this, and he said, hey, there's like some 5% stuff in this movie. So I was interested, right? And I watched it, and I saw what he was talking about. But
wait, there's 5%er stuff in there?
A little bit. I think there's way more Gnosticism than there is 5% stuff, but 5% stuff is influenced by Gnosticism, in my opinion.
Huh. Yeah, because 5%ers, yeah. I have a background in 5%ers.
I saw more Gnosticism than I did 5%, but I know what he's talking about. So I watch it because of that, right? I was kind of interested in it. Mm-hmm. And I said, wait a minute, why is no one... I watched a lot of reviews after I watched McCrae's review, and I said, why is no one paying attention to this Gnostic influenced Jesus? And I knew the reason. Everybody was caught up on the color portrayal, the ethnic portrayal of Jesus and the disciples. I didn't think that was the most material, relevant thing of this whole venture. My view was the most problematic thing is not portrayal of ethnicity. I was kind of like, we've had lots of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. Is okay, whatever, So, it's like even the scales. That's my. But it was, wait a minute, where's this Jesus getting these lines from? And sure enough, it was Gnostic stuff. And once I saw the bird scene, I knew it. So what happened is I explained this to my audience, and my audience, I realized, was sort of not very aware of these Gnostic sources and then the contents of them, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, don't worry, after I do this review, I'm going to do a whole show on Gnostic stuff, right? When I did it, I just mentioned about it being in the Quran. So then it went from there to there, and next thing I know, I was doing presentations on Gnostic sources in the Quran, mm-hmm. All because of the Book of Clarence, really.
So,
No, I'm not Robin Hood.
Is that Clarence 13X?
Well, so that's what's interesting. The character's name who portrays a Messiah-like figure. It's not actually Jesus, by the way, but the guy who portrays a Messiah-like figure, but he's a fraud at first. His name is Clarence. So that's somewhere John was like, why is this dude's name Clarence? And it was odd that this dude's name was Clarence. And he's supposed to be the twin of Thomas. Now, that's not actually a Gnostic thing. I don't know if people
Yeah, he was called
know,
the
but
twin, so he had a twin.
Thomas is called the twin, Didymus. But because of that, a lot of Gnostic sources played on that idea about Thomas's twin. There was a lot of Gnostic literature emphasizing him and his kind of role in this kind of thing. So that's Gnostic stuff too. But that was the thing I saw is Jesus speaking Gnosticism in the Book of Clarence. And it just led me down a rabbit trail to where I was like, I've never really presented on the Gnostic sources in the Quran. And I have had a conversation with my dead friend, Elton Simpson. We specifically talked about this.
You're talking about the guy who was the basis for the hit show, Islamicize Me.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, guys. So Islamicize Me was, as pointed out in the last video in the series, that it was actually loosely based on a true story of some guys who converted to Islam and became jihadis and went to kill Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller and others at a cartoon contest, and they got massacred. And we decided to actually make fun of the process whereby someone would believe a bunch of Dawa nonsense and then decide to go on a killing spree. We made fun of all that. Somehow we're the bad guys. We're the bad guys for making fun of people going on, trying to go on a killing spree. So anyway, so you had that conversation with him, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I did. And I didn't know as much about Islam at that time when I was having these conversations with him as I would know later on. But I did know about some of the Gnostic influences in the Quran. And so I talked to him about it. And I distinctly remember him saying, what does it matter where it comes from if it's true? That was his response when I brought up these Gnostic sources. So his view was, it doesn't matter, it's true. Now, he didn't elaborate much more, but he was kind of like, however it happened, Allah preserved part of the original Injil or something like that, whatever the case. It didn't matter to him. It was clearly, obviously true because it was in the Quran. So wherever a Christian sees it first doesn't matter to him. And so that he had a very kind of casual attitude about it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is an issue. And by the way, if you have two basic options. I'm talking from a Muslim perspective here. Muslims, you have two basic options here. When you read stories in the Quran that are clearly found in completely unreliable sources. In other words, it's not that Muhammad is copying something that we know is historically accurate. It's that he's copying stories that come from later sources that no one takes seriously because they were made up by people who are fabricating sources left and right. And so when we find a story in the Quran and we trace it back to a known forgery that was circulating in Arabia in the 7th century, and we ask, what's the most likely explanation here? The most likely explanation for non-Muslims is, well, Muhammad was copying stories from everyone around him, and he didn't know the difference between something that actually happened and something that's just a myth or a fable. So that's what we would conclude is the best explanation. If you're a Muslim, that's not open to you that Muhammad is just copying forgeries because he doesn't know any better. So you basically have two options. One, you could believe that even though we have the story in the Quran and we trace it back to some obvious forgery, you have to conclude that it happened anyway. That even though it's Muhammad said it in the Quran, or you would believe that Allah said it in the Quran, and we could trace it back to an obvious forgery, you have to believe that the obvious forgery, at least the part that's telling the story that's found in the Quran, got that part right. It got that part right. And so was it Muhammad copying it? This was a revelation from Allah that just happens to line up with this obvious forgery. So you believe that the story actually happened. That's the main option that most Muslims will go with when they hear about this. The other option, which is a minority position, but this is the position of people like Shabir Ali, is that, yes, there are these earlier stories that were fabricated. They're myths, they're legends, they're fables. But there's nothing wrong, again, this is the Shabir Ali position, there's nothing wrong with Allah using a story that's basically a fable to make some point out of it. So given this view, when you read about Alexander the Great traveling so far west, he finds a place with a sunset, you don't have to believe that actually happened. Shabir actually compared it to Marvel movies. He said, could a preacher get up and say, it's just like when the Hulk went and fought Thor and blah, 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 blah. Could he make a point out of that, even though it's just a movie? It's not something we're taking seriously. Shabir says yes. And it's weird because I actually think that is a better position because we know that a lot of these things are forgeries. And it boggles the mind. If you only had to do it once, we might say, okay, maybe that thing did happen. When Muhammad copies these fables over and over and over and over and over again, you say, no, they all happened, even though they all come from 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century sources. The more you have to do this, the more unlikely and absurd it all looks to us. So we're gonna see that here. I did want to ask you real quick: are the 5%ers still like a thing? Because they were big in the 90s in Virginia. So I was locked up in Virginia in the 1990s, and they were like the biggest group. They were the biggest. I mean, it's like false religion. They were the biggest group. They were bigger than Muslims. They were bigger than Muslims. They were bigger than the Nation of Islam. The biggest like cult-like group in the prison system in Virginia when I was locked up was the 5%ers. They were the biggest. So they still around in big numbers, or have they die? Are they dying out, or how's that going?
So I'm in contact with a couple of chaplains, David, who are involved in different prison systems, specifically one in New York and another one who is in Houston, Texas, and a few others that's more touch and go. But the chaplains told me how that used to be the case in their areas and now how it's not the case. And what they're seeing replace it is Hebrew Israelism. That's why these chaplains contacted me.
That's the way things seem to me, because that was not a big thing when I was locked up, but that seems like a way bigger thing now than it was back in the 90s.
Yeah. So that's what I'm getting. And I still keep tabs as best I can on some 5% stuff because I'm highly interested in it. It's just there's a really small market of interest, for lack of a better word, and not a lot of new movement in the movement. And mainly what I get, to be frank with you, is a lot of older men who get together and kind of reminisce about being a 5%er, and they share kind of rehashed knowledge, but there's really no new crop of young bloods that's discernible to any kind of discernible way. And so it's mainly guys who say, my name is Knowledge Born God Allah, and I've been in this thing for 30 years. That's what you get, a lot of that when you watch their current videos or resharing older stuff. They still do barbecues in different meetups, not always a barbecue, but some kind of meetup in like local city parks where there's maybe a dozen or 20 to get together, and maybe they'll have families and stuff, but it's not very influential and it's really esoteric from what I can tell as far as the 5%ers go.
Yeah, because that was big like in the rap world back in the day too, right? Like 80s and 90s and stuff like that.
Yeah, I often tell people this, and I don't even know if
wasn't that like Wu-Tang Clan and like the Fugees and all kinds of groups back then?
Yeah, but a lot of those groups really mix like all kind. It was like a mishmash, hodgepodge of a lot of urban spiritualities at that time. So if you listen to the Bible song on the Jizz album, that song is Hebrew. He literally mentions Deuteronomy 28 on it. It's a kill a priest. He literally mentions Deuteronomy 28, which is a Hebrew Israelite favorite text. So they had mishmash of stuff, but primarily 5% stuff, Wu-Tang, no doubt about that. In fact, if you watch the Wu-Tang show on a Hulu, which is pretty good actually, you'll see all the 5% influence in there, you know what I mean? And so that is the case, the 5% stuff. But it was big in hip-hop. In fact, my first exposure to Islam wasn't Islam Orthodox proper. It was Nation of Islam stuff.
Yeah, and so for people who don't know a lot about what we're talking about, I've never studied it. This is just what I gathered from listening to 5%ers when I was locked up. As far as the name 5%, I forget what the breakdown is, but they would say that like 80% of people or 85% of people don't know and don't follow the truth, and then like 10 or 15% of people know the truth but don't follow it, and then like the 5% of people, those are the people who know the truth and follow it. So they're the 5%, but it's as far as I've gathered, you have the Nation of Islam, which is an offshoot of Islam, and then you had an offshoot of that, which is the 5%, which is this dude Clarence 13X,
Yes.
and he taught that the black man is God, and he had the nation of gods and earths. I remember them. I think the earths are the women or their wives or
Yes.
something like that. So I've seen they had that stuff written all over the place. They would all give themselves names like universal and divine and stuff like that. They
Hmm.
would speak in their I don't know if this is everywhere, but in the prison system they all spoke in this language where they would spell things. They would spell things.
Then give an
They
acronym.
would spell out what they wanted to say by using the first letter of every word. In other words, they would, if they wanted to say yes, they would say a word that started with a Y, then a word that started with an E, like equality, and then the S. And they thought that no one could figure out what they're saying when we all could. But finally one day, one guy said it. He goes, "Hey, if you think we haven't figured out your little language where it's just the first letter of every word and you're spelling things out, I think y'all have been smoking a little too much wisdom, equality, divine," right? So I was cracked up because the dude yelled that down the hall. Um, but anyway, so and then something like the white man was created by a two-brain scientist named Yakub who grafted the skin of a pig onto a person or something like that. I don't know if that's official or if that was just the people I was around or something.
Yakub is definitely an official, and 5% guys I've heard, and I've actually heard Nation of Islam because they share this belief. That's an NOI belief too. I've heard them say that genetics have proved that something like that's the case. That they basically have Yakub as like it's sort of metaphorical for like a really like somebody doing genetic editing, basically like gene editing, like the CRISPR project or something.
Yeah.
What they say is that he was basically experimenting with being able to take away blackness from the original man until he got a derivative that was devoid of anything that was good because he got so far from the original. And that is how you produce the white man. And it sounds crazy to people, but you got to understand, it's sort of an explanation for injustice, meaning like, okay, how do we explain what this group of oppressive people to us?
Two-brain scientists made them.
Yeah, so it's a way to say like, this is how fallen they are. You know what I mean? They're so far fallen from what a human should be. That this is what you have as the result, and that's why they act the way they do. It's their nature. And you know, Razkaz, who was an underground LA rapper, he had a song that came out that was big in the late 90s, mid 90s called Nature of the Threat. And the whole song was all about that type of stuff. But yeah, man. So it's not as big now because people were just talking about drinking lean or something, you know?
Yeah, you know what's weird is I to this day I mean apart from like divine intervention or something I have no yeah I was gonna think maybe because I was 6'3" and 240 pounds or something like that, but that no there I was totally outnumbered. I to this day I have no clue how I didn't just get the crap beat out of me repeatedly by those dudes, because like other people who mouthed off to them got the crap beat out of them, and I mouthed off to them constantly, and they never mess with me at all. Matter of fact, I've still got it somewhere. I don't know if it's in a box or somewhere around here, but I still have my Bible where I wrote 100%er down the down the side of my Bible. It said 100%er, and so I'm walking around with that, and they go, "Hey, what do you mean 100%er?" I'll be like, and I go, "Well, you know, I'm a Christian, so I can't be settling for anything less than 100%. I can't be settling for 90, 80, 5." Right? I'll just say that, and I'd go on and stuff. But anyway. That's basically. I was always kind of goofing off with them and messing with them and stuff. But nope, I don't know. Yeah, they never did anything to me. Muslims would surround people in a heartbeat. They never really mess with me. It was weird. They would go and complain to the administration about. I have no clue. I have no clue on some of the stuff. I have an idea of why the Muslims didn't mess with me. It turns out I found out later that the leader, the imam, I'd had discussions with him, and he said, "Hey, whatever you do, stay away from David," because he was worried I was going to like hurt their faith. But they actually just wouldn't go around me, even though they'd thug up on everyone else. So I was like, "What are they scared of me or something? What is this going on? Is what's going on here?" And I found out later, no, their leader had said, "Stay away from that guy," because he was worried like I was going to convince him to leave Islam or something like that. With the 5%ers, I have zero clue. I have zero clue to this day. Anyway. we're going. So anyway, that the 5%ers. That's not what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. That was all just because we went down the little rabbit trail there of how vocab got interested in the Gnostic stuff, and then how we're going to look at the Quran, because that is one of Muhammad's sources for the Quran, is apparently some Gnostic text. We'll take a couple super chats, then we're going to look at the accusation. So just quick outline here. We're going to take the super chats that we've gotten so far. Then we're going to look at what the Quran says. What the Quran says about the people around Muhammad accusing him of plagiarism. And then we will see vocab's going to go through some of the sources where he thinks Muhammad was stealing stories. And keep in mind, guys, because the objection always comes up. What? How can you say that Muhammad was copying these sources when he was illiterate? One, it's not clear that Muhammad is illiterate. The Muslim sources are inconsistent on that point, but I normally grant it, because if you want to brag about your prophet being illiterate, more power to you. But yeah, keep in mind, this is an oral culture. People would sit around. They don't have televisions. They don't have radios. You sit around telling stories. So when we say Muhammad plagiarized, we're saying that he heard a story and then he passed it off as his own revelation from Allah. So that is the claim. And keep in mind, when we say that, we are not the first. This goes back to the time of Muhammad. From the time of Muhammad down to the present, people have been accusing Muhammad of plagiarizing other sources. And this is just amazing, because it's all over the Quran. It's all over the Quran that Allah's constantly responding to claims that Muhammad was a serial plagiarist. But a couple super chats real quick, and then we'll jump into this topic. David is late because AP peed in his ears. No. AP would get slapped. Anyway, hey Malone, want ba in your vocab? Got to watch out. That's the channel Goat Hub. It's probably it's a fan of AP who comes in. It's the most popular site in Pakistan, Goat Hub.
Oh wow,
David, we can tell that's not AP. Allah finally got him. You can't fool us. No, AP's doing some other stuff. AP's doing some other stuff this week. I think he gets back. I think he gets back tomorrow. I don't know if he'll feel like doing anything, but we'll see. AP
poor man's AP.
Yeah, the poor man's AP. The poor man's Christian AP. Hey, vocab, I don't know if you saw it, but AP has downgraded his atheism to agnosticism now. Or we would consider that an upgrade. He no longer considers himself an atheist, but an agnostic instead. So he's making those power moves.
I was looking forward to when that would happen.
Yep. Let's see. AP is looking really familiar today. He's looking like a Christian apologist I watch. I can't remember his name at the moment, though. I hate when that happens. You do live streams with everyone but Mike Winger. Yeah. And if Adolf Hitler were still alive, I wouldn't do a live stream with him either. What's your point? What? Hey, would you and IP look at Bart Ehan video? You mean Ehrman? Video, are the Gospels historically reliable? The problem of contradictions, if that's okay. If enough, I mean, people have been dealing with that with the Bart Ehrman stuff for years. So I don't know if I don't know if he has something new. The legends from Islamicize me. And Muhammad's Boom Boom Room, that's true. Makes me want to watch Halal Hogan practice mutta and get 50% off my punishments by squatting to pee. Yes, guys, don't forget, according to Muhammad, most of the punishment of the grave, so the punishment after you die, is because of urinating improperly. I'm not making that up. That is straight from Muhammad. The next Zakir Naik says, Slow Cab the Calvinist is as late as AP. Draw your own conclusions. The conclusion is that Calvinism is basically atheism. Hey there, I just wanted to say you helped me. Oh, this is cool. Hey there, just wanted to say you helped me see the light and I found Jesus Christ. I was on the fence, but now I do accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Thank you. Well, you know what that gets. Hallelujah. 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 Here we go. And one more, and then we're going to jump into it. Most everything in Islam is nothing more than a copy of other religions. Absolutely. That is what I've been saying for years. That was my first impression of Islam when I started looking into it. I used to say it. I've been saying it. I used to say it regularly in presentations and stuff. I point out that If you take sort of Jewish monotheism and some of the stories from the Torah and from the Talmud that were circulating among Jews during the time of Muhammad, and you take some Christian stories, some of them heretical and so on, and you grab those, and then you take some ideas of the pagans about, this paradise of eternal deflowering of hot babes and stuff, and you take some basic pagan practices like walking circles around the Kaaba and kissing the black stone and everything. If you take everything that is right around Muhammad in 7th century Arabia and you roll it up into a ball, it's Islam. It is exactly what you'd get if you took everything that was available during the time of Muhammad, you combined it all, and you tried to avoid some of the contradictions between the things. In other words, we can't have Jesus being divine because of this and this and that. Anyway, you just take it all and roll it up into a ball, you get Islam. So definitely some plagiarism going on there. But don't take my word for it, ladies and gentlemen. So vocab, we're going to take a look at the Quran real quick, couple verses from the Quran, and then you can tell us what you've been finding.
You taking me off the screen for a second?
What?
Are you going to put something on the screen? Well, I'm going to try. I don't like the focus of my camera mainly.
No one cares about the focus of your camera. The focus is fine.
But it's just you going to be talking. I just want to try to fix this. I don't know.
Oh, well, I'm about to have these verses up on the screen. So there.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. There you go.
Okay. All right, guys. Let's go through these verses. There are more. But try to get your minds around these verses. I recommend. Matter of fact, I just shared a picture of these on Twitter a little while ago with the relevant portions underlined. And I point this out. Because I have Muslim apologetics books. In fact, I don't know if it's the most widely circulated Muslim apologetics book in history. It could be. It's either Towards Understanding Islam by Maududi, which I've been handed multiple times on multiple college campuses by Muslim organizations. Towards Understanding Islam by Maududi. And the other most popular one is A Brief Illustrated Guide to Understanding Islam. Those are the ones I've seen all over the place for a long, long time. Anyway, in Towards Understanding Islam, I read that. Massive. Matter of fact, I was so shocked by reading the amount of deception in Towards Understanding Islam. That's what really clued me into the fact, like, my goodness, Dawah is just pure deception. That's all it ever is. It's just deception. It's just lies. But in Towards Understanding Islam, Maududi says that when Muhammad would give one of his revelations, Muhammad would receive a revelation in Mecca, and then he would stand up to recite his new revelation. And when he stood up to recite his new revelation, according to Maududi, the unbelievers would have to cover their ears and run away screaming because they were so convinced that it's obviously had to be from God that they would have to run away in fear to avoid converting because of the power of the Quran. And the reason I looked at that and said, my goodness, this is deceptive, is because you go to the Quran, you go to the Sirah, everywhere you go, the unbelievers were constantly mocking Muhammad and his revelations, saying, this is pathetic, Muhammad. Come on. Are you serious? You expect us to believe this nonsense? And so did Maududi know that? Of course. That man wrote his own massive commentary on the Quran. He knows these verses. So why is he going around saying that the reaction of the pagans is to run away screaming and covering their ears from the power of it? Because Dawah is deception. That's all it is. But check out these verses, ladies and gentlemen. I recommend jotting down a couple of these references and sharing them everywhere. Remember, guys, I constantly say, whatever your level of knowledge, if you want to help expose Islam, you don't have to go out and learn all of it at the beginning. You can learn one thing and share one thing. This is an example of one thing you can learn and share it everywhere, right? You can share this on YouTube. You can share it on Facebook. You can share it on Twitter. And whenever someone's boasting about how great the Quran is and how clearly it's from Allah, just share some of these verses. because they present a problem for the standard Islamic narrative. But let's check out some of these. Surah 6, verse 25. Of them are some who pretend to listen to thee, but we have thrown veils on their hearts, so they understand it not, and deafness in their ears. If they saw every one of the signs, not they will believe in them. Insomuch that when they come to thee, they but dispute with thee. The unbelievers say, these are nothing but tales of the ancients. Tales of the ancients. You see that over and over again. Some will, you can look at different translations. Some will say fables of the men of old. Someone will say fairy tales of the ancients, things like that. But this is what they're saying to Muhammad when he says, I have a revelation. They say, come on, these are nothing but tales of the ancients. In other words, we've heard this story before. Surah 8, verse 31. When our signs, so that's verses of the Quran, when our signs are rehearsed to them, they say, we have heard this before. If we wished, we could say words like these. These are nothing but tales of the ancients. That's their reaction when they hear verses. We've heard this before. Surah 9, verse 61. Among them are men who molest the prophet. Among them are men who molest the prophet. Yes, Muhammad got molested. Among them are men who molest the prophet. And say he is all ear. Some of the translations put it, he is an ear. That's the literal. That's the literal version. He is an ear. He is an ear. They call him the ear. Why do they call him the ear? They call him the ear because he just listens to what everyone else says and he passes it off. As his own revelation. So look at this. Among them are men who molest the prophet and say, he is all ear. Say, he listens to what is best for you. He believes in God, has faith in the believers, and is a mercy to those of you who believe. But those who molest the apostle will have a grievous penalty. So how are they molesting him? They're saying he's an ear. They're making fun of him for just believing what other people say and passing it off as his own revelations. Surah 16, verse 103. We know indeed that they say, it is a man that teaches him. The tongue of him they wickedly point to is notably foreign. Well, this is Arabic, pure and clear. This, by the way, guys, is the dumbest response to any objection in the history of humanity. So here they're actually talking about a specific guy. Wait a minute, Muhammad's over there. He's having conversations with that guy. And then Muhammad comes out and says, I have a revelation. And he tells the same story that guy's telling. What's going on there? Why is Muhammad over there talking to a guy and then coming in and saying he has a revelation? Look at Allah's response. We know indeed that they say it is a man that teaches him. The tongue of him they wickedly point to is notably foreign. Well, this is Arabic, pure and clear. So the response of Allah, the response that Allah gives to the claim that Muhammad is plagiarizing other people's stories, the response that Allah gives is, no, that other guy's a foreigner that Muhammad's speaking to. He's a foreigner, but Muhammad's revelations are in Arabic. So there's no way Muhammad is copying this other guy's stories. Muhammad's revelations are in Arabic. This guy's a foreigner. So Muhammad can't possibly be copying that other guy's stuff. Guys, that is absolutely insane. Just imagine if I were friends with Dostoevsky, the Russian writer, right? Way back in the day. Suppose I were friends with Dostoevsky and you see me hanging out with Dostoevsky. You say, wow, David's hanging out with Dostoevsky. And then I come forward and I say, I am a prophet and I have a revelation. And my revelation is that a man named Raskolnikov went and attacked a pawnbroker, killed her, took her stuff, took all her stuff. That's what he did. Yes. And then he had to struggle with his conscience and he eventually turned himself in and was sentenced to. You'd say, wait, that's Crime and Punishment. David, you just copied. You're sitting there talking to Dostoevsky and all of a sudden you copy his story, Crime and Punishment. Imagine that happened. Imagine I'm sitting there talking to Dostoevsky. And all of a sudden I come out with my story and it's exactly from the book that Dostoevsky wrote, Crime and Punishment. And you say, David, you obviously copied Dostoevsky. Imagine me saying, no, I didn't, because I have received a revelation. And God has said David couldn't have copied that man's story because that man is Russian and David is speaking English. So there's no way he copied that story. What's the assumption here? That you can't copy stuff from another language? Is that a relevant assumption? Is that true? You can't copy a story from a different language? That's Allah's response. That's Allah's response to Muhammad being known for talking to a guy, then coming and passing that guy's stories off as his own revelations. And then when it gets pointed out, Muhammad is copying that dude. We know that dude. We know that dude's stories. Muhammad is copying that dude and passing off that guy's stories as his own revelations. The response from Allah, according to Muhammad, is no, because that guy, his stories are in a foreign language. And Muhammad, who's talking to him, Muhammad's revelations are in Arabic. So there's no way, it's impossible that Muhammad is copying that guy's stuff. This is insane. This is insane and ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. All right, last little passage here. Surah 25, verses 4 to 5. But the misbelievers say, naught is this, the Quran, naught is this but a lie which he has forged, and others have helped him at it. So the accusation is Muhammad is forging his revelations and that others are helping him do it. In truth, it is they who have put forward an iniquity and a falsehood. And they say, tales of the ancients which he has caused to be written, and they are dictated before him morning and evening. So Muhammad has people telling him stuff morning and night, early in the day and later in the day. You have people telling Muhammad things. And then he's walking out saying, I have a revelation. And the unbelievers say, these are tales of the ancients. We've heard this stuff before. Does this sound like a bunch of people who are shocked by the power of the Quran and who have to run away, covering their ears because it's so powerful? Is that what these guys sound like? No, they sound like people who they think the Quran's a total joke and they think it's obviously copied because every time they hear a story, then Muhammad comes out and says, I have a revelation. And he tells the same thing they all heard over and over again. That's their actual reaction. Not according to me, not according to vocab, according to the Quran itself. According to Allah in the Quran, this is how people really reacted to Muhammad's so-called revelations. And the Quran spends a lot of time responding to these claims that Muhammad is plagiarizing other people's stories. The Quran spends an awful lot of time responding to that, never gives a good response. There's always things like, oh, but that guy's foreign, so Muhammad couldn't have copied that guy that he's talking to and comes out with the same stories. Muhammad couldn't have copied that guy because that guy has a different language. So that's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. That is where we are at as far as the Quran is concerned. The Quran shows that one of the most common, most frequent objections to Muhammad's revelations is that they were plagiarized. And we're going to find out a little bit about why people thought that here. Got a couple more super chats real quick. We'll check these out. Michelle says, Dr. D. Wood, did you talk to Vocab about making some Boom Boom Room episodes with Masab Hassan Yusuf? Love the videos. Keep exposing the fallacies of Islam. Great work, guys. Masab would be a little tricky because we'd have to find someone who looks like him. We normally try to look like people. I don't know anyone who looks. We'll keep our eyes open. If we can find someone who looks like Masab and can do an impression of Masab, maybe we'll do something there. Let's see. Ben Yehudi says, I like what Clavin says about the Groypers. The only Jew they hate is the big Jew and our Savior, Jesus Christ. And is anything Gnostic okay to believe? So, yeah, why don't you break down, before we jump into this, break down what Gnosticism is. And so there's a question here. Is anything Gnostic okay to believe?
Great question. All right. Gnosticism is a set of beliefs that arose, I'm going to say, in the late first century. Now, even saying that, there's scholars who want to debate about this. And if somebody runs across somebody who's trying to say that, let me show you a book I recommend. I recommend this book by scholar Edwin Yamauchi, Pre-Christian Gnosticism, a survey of the proposed evidences. What he does is show that no, Gnosticism was not part of the raw material that influenced Christianity, because that's what certain scholars try to say about this Gnostic Christianity. And they say that our version is just the one that happened to win. Now, that's what you'll get into if you listen to Harvard professors, Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, Karen King. These folks, that's the kind of thing they'll say. Some even try to postulate that the Gospel of Thomas, which is an early Gnostic document, is actually Q, and that would make Q the actual source that the Gospels are drawing upon, at least the synoptics. Now, there's not good evidence for that either. In fact, it's been demonstrated that Thomas was familiar with the synoptics. Mark Goodacre, he's over there at Duke, has a great book, The Case for Thomas's Familiarity with the Synoptics.
Yeah,
and so
Gnosticism. I just wanted to point out, Nabil and I were actually at the conference. So this is right after Nabil became a Christian, and we headed to EPS ETS, and there was a guy who was the leading scholar in the world on something like second century sources. And he showed by actually pointing out the parallels and so on, that whoever wrote Thomas was already familiar with a harmonization of the four gospels and so on. And he went like verse by verse. So look, this is a parallel here. Look, this comes right after this, just as it does over here. And he showed that. So yeah, it was a pretty it was interesting, because that was kind of the bread and butter for the Jesus seminar back in the day, that Thomas was this early source, and then it all started crumbling. And now you don't hear it a lot anymore.
No, now Thomas is earlier than most of the other Gnostic sources, but I think the earliest you can legitimately date Thomas is 150.
And that's what, he said something like that. He said something like 160. He said basically second half of the second century.
And when you read Thomas, about half of it is ripped off from the Gospels. And yes, it does appear it's specifically from the Diatessaron, which is put together by Tatian, who is Justin Martyr's mentor, it seems. And, when you look at the Diatessaron, you're like, okay, this looks like it influenced Thomas. And then the other half of Thomas, not all of it, but it's weird stuff. And obviously the biggest weird one is saying 114, hey, get Mary out of here, Jesus, Peter says. Jesus says, don't worry, Mary can stay. I'll turn her into a male so she can inherit the kingdom. Because Peter was saying, hey, she's a female and they're not worthy of life. And Jesus says, no, I'll change her into a male. Now they try to have ways that they try to get around the obvious misogyny there. They try, people that are defenders of these documents. But the main thing to know about Gnosticism, everyone, is it's not Jewish. What I mean by that is it's thoroughly Greek, it's thoroughly philosophical, it's thoroughly anti-materialistic. And when I say material in that sense, I mean of the material world, because you read the Hebrew documents of the Old Testament and it's clear that God is responsible for creating this. He calls it very good. Now it's in a sinful state because of Genesis 3, but the Gnostics had a different story they told. And instead of the created matter being good, it was a product of a mistake or an accident or even a vicious God in some versions of these Gnostic origins stories. And so the way they explain the problem of evil is matter itself, the material world itself, is bad because it's part of a creation of a God who himself is ignorant, arrogant, and full of hubris. And so the way to overcome these challenges presented by this physical world, and this is very Neoplatonic in its essence, is to basically understand secret knowledge. And each time you get new secret knowledge, you're able to basically conquer a mini boss, an archon that is sort of over that level of knowledge, and then you go to the next one, and eventually you're able to escape any kind of need of anything physical because you realize it's irrelevant anyway, and your knowledge has helped you elevate out of it. And you can see this in foundations of Platonic thought, where he would say things like, I believe it was Plato that said it, I always second guess myself now the days the older you get, but that the body is a prison house or a jailhouse for the soul. And there you see this idea of like you're encaptured and stuck in this physical realm, and knowledge will help you get out of it. And so that's why Gnosticism is called Gnosticism, because because it comes from the Greek word gnosis, and gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge. And so they didn't have salvation, they more had liberation. And the bondage they're trying to be free from, the Gnostics, that is not from sin and all of that. It's actually from ignorance and the limitations of the physical realm. And so they wanted to ascend past that. And once you understand that background, then you'll understand why they don't have Jesus getting crucified on the cross, but leaving some other guy up there who may be the shell that the cosmic Christ inhabited, or some other person. And while this guy is getting crucified in a lot of these accounts, we'll see this at the end of the show, this Jesus, this Gnostic Jesus, is laughing. He's like, that's not me. And it literally says he's laughing. And, some people have taken advantage of this. There's even a book called The Laughing Jesus, written by a couple of hacks, but they got that title from the fact that this Gnostic Jesus was laughing at whoever this dunce was that was on the cross. And so when we talk about Gnosticism, it's not Christianity. It's Greek Neoplatonic thought based upon essentially pagan philosophy that co-opted Christian symbols. We don't fully know the origin, and we do know there's varieties of Gnosticism, but it co-opted Christianity. It's not native to Christianity because it's thoroughly anti-Jewish. And most of the Gnostic documents, David, know nothing about the Old Testament. They usually just throw it under the bus, and they know very little about the environs of Israel. There are some exceptions where some are a little more Semitic than others, but by and large, they're clearly Greek.
Yeah. So, as far as the question, anything Gnostic okay to believe? It's a weird kind of question because they did, as Vocab pointed out, they did steal some stuff from Christianity, but it would be weird saying that there are some good ideas in Gnosticism. So the general idea is you have like the highest being, and then that thing, let's say God, there's this offshoot of that. They call it an emanation. There's an emanation of another kind of deity, and then from that proceeds a kind of another deity, and then this keeps going for a while until you get a really messed up deity. He's down at the bottom. He's bottom of the barrel, and he creates our material world. And so now you've got this screwed up material world that's bad, and your goal is to kind of go back. Your goal is to get the knowledge to kind of go back up that hierarchy until you have some sort of knowledge of the highest being type deal and so on. So it's basically, to get your mind around it, guys, Alexander the Great, he spreads the Greek language and culture from Europe all the way to India, and so people speak Greek everywhere you go, and this allowed certain Greek philosophies to spread rapidly because now people can speak Greek, so it's easy to transmit stuff. Christianity also spread rapidly because the way had been prepared that if you are putting out your preaching, your writings in Greek, this can spread rapidly now because now wherever you go, you can find people who speak, you can find Greek speakers. And so this Greek philosophical ideas, Neoplatonism and so on, that spreads rapidly. Christianity spreads rapidly, and you end up these things, you get some hybrids, which is Gnosticism. You get the hybrid, some Neoplatonist ideas get combined with Christian symbols and so on, and you get Gnosticism. And people would hear it, and Christians would hear it, and they're talking about Jesus, and they're talking about Jesus doing this and that and so on, and they think, okay, that's Christianity. When if people actually knew real Christianity, they would say, that's obvious. That's an obvious knockoff. That's an obvious cheap knockoff there. Yeah. But here's the thing. Muhammad couldn't tell the difference. And one of the interesting thing was, I think it was which emperor? I think it was Emperor Justinian who expelled heretics from the Roman Empire. He said, heretics, if you have these heretical Gnostic and stuff ideas, get out of here or you're going to be in trouble. And a bunch of those guys moved to Arabia because that was past the Roman Empire. And so you had heretical Christian groups preaching in Arabia, and they had their own writings, and shocker, those same stories end up in the Quran. Very interesting stuff. So we know where these ideas come from. We know where these ideas come from. We can locate them. We can locate the sources. Then they end up in the Quran, and Muslims either, again, have to believe them. They have to believe, well, it happened anyway, even though we can only trace these to Gnostic or Docetus stories or something like that. Or you have to believe that the Quran is not saying these things actually happen. It's just using them to tell stories, something. But you have to do something. You have to do something with those stories. All right, couple super chats, couple super chats, vocab. Then you can jump into your presentation. Muslims say Jesus and Abraham were Muslims, so technically they can say that all the stories in the Torah and New Testament are Islam stories, no plagiarism, right? Well, no, the thing is, we're not pointing out that there's a problem with the stories coming from the Torah and the New Testament. It's Muhammad stories that weren't from the Torah or the New Testament, but were from like the Talmud, stories that were in the Talmud, those found their way into the Quran. And stories that come from later, we're talking about sources that are outside the New Testament, that are from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th centuries. And we know where the stories come from, and those end up in the Quran. So there's no way to avoid the claims of plagiarism here. But even the stories, if Muhammad has a story that's straight out of the Bible, if we know he's copying all these other stories, and then he says he's got a story and it's the same one that's in the Bible, you'd still think this guy's plagiarizing. If all your other stories that we can check on were plagiarized, then even if you agree with us on something, where'd you get it? Revelation? You said you got all these other things from Revelation too. We know you didn't get those from Revelation. Definitely doesn't look like it. So yeah, you're stuck with plagiarism no matter what. Check out Dershowitz versus Greenspan recent debate. Also a debate between Destiny and a random liberal Catholic who supports Palestine expose the frauds. Yeah, we'll see when AP is back if he wants to go through some of that stuff. Let's see. Is retaking Constantinople possible? Why do Christians ignore the holy city and our beloved Hagia Sophia? I mean, retaking Constantinople would be pretty darn easy, right? I mean, any Western nation could go and take Constantinople. It's, do you want to do that? What would the principle be? That well, that was a Christian place centuries ago, so we're going to go and retake it. You know, I joke about that, but it's most people don't have that mentality of, if something belonged to someone else 5 centuries ago or something like that, you have to go retake it. If so, it's World War III all over the world, because tons of places were once controlled by other people. So I don't think anyone's going to be going and fighting to get Constantinople back anytime soon. And one more here. Most uniquely Gnostic ideas were condemned as heresies in the early church. Irenaeus' Against Heresies is a great text for all Christians. Yeah, Gnosticism is, and what do they call it? Because there are passages like in some of the letters and so on that seem to be responding to some Gnostic ideas. That normally gets called proto-Gnosticism, like it was already happening as Christianity was spreading. Even in the 1st century, it's running into some Greek ideas, and it's being combined with some Greek ideas. And so you actually have letters of the New Testament that are responding to some sort of like proto-Gnostic ideas. But
yeah, First John, which says, if anybody says Jesus Christ didn't come in the flesh, they're Antichrist. That and some other things in First John that go out of their way to talk about physical things related to Jesus clearly seem to be against Docetism, which is a key component of Gnosticism, often in most schemes. And so First John definitely has anti-Docetic elements in there. Colossians does, but scholars have shied away from just wanting to call it Gnosticism proper. They'll sometimes just call it the Colossian heresy, which is syncretic. And so it's a mishmash of a bunch of different things, including some that might look like what sometimes people do call proto-Gnosticism, just like you said. And, you got to understand, people, how different this religion is, this Gnostic religion, because they have the Old Testament God in a lot of versions of this being an evil God. And his name was Yaldabaoth, and he's this demiurge. And sometimes he's represented as a lion-faced serpentine deity, and this is the demiurge who accidentally or out of his hubris created the created order. And so he's exactly right, Irenaeus and others, but Irenaeus is probably the most precise and incisive. They do go after these folks and do criticize their ideas. And I would say they accurately represent their ideas. Liberals always like to act like the church fathers got all these ideas wrong. But I think when we really look at what the Gnostics taught and what we have lined up, the early church fathers who went after this stuff, they understood it, and they understood how big of a heresy it was.
And even with the demiurge there, you can tell why it's called Neoplatonism. Plato talked about the demiurge, and that was in his dialogue, the Timaeus, when he's talking about the creation of the world. But you have the good, that's the form of the good. That's like pure goodness, the essence of goodness. And the demiurge is a creator, a kind of designer, but he's working with matter. He's working with the matter that becomes our world. And he's trying to make it good, but it's matter, so it's defective. So he's looking at the good, the essence of goodness, and he's trying to make this world good, but you just can't do it because you're using matter to do it, and so on. And so you can see that that idea gets carried on for a few centuries and morphs into some other stuff.
He's doing his best, but he doesn't have enough power to maintain the good because he's ultimately working with matter, like you said, and he's just not up for the task.
Yeah. Two more real quick, and then we'll jump into your presentation. Muhammad didn't make a mistake. He pointed to the true scripture because he also didn't have a physical body, just like all the true prophets. Yeah, no physical body for Muhammad. No way he was out there. He was banging all his brides with his spiritual body. David, thanks so much for all you do and your ministry. It has helped me grow in my faith immensely. God bless. Well, we're just getting started, Knowles. Way more cool stuff to come. All right, vocab, how you want to go about this presentation? Ready to jump into it?
Yeah, I am. If you want to
pop that up, pop up your PowerPoint. You got a PowerPoint to share sources. Okay.
Yes, I do. And
right.
we want to talk about these Gnostic sources in the Quran. And first, we want to talk about Muhammad's influences, because it's clear that he was influenced by a number of things, a number of which you've already mentioned here today, David. Obviously, Jewish beliefs, Orthodox Christianity, heretical Christian sects, pagan folklore and customs, and it looks like some Gnostic teachings as well. And
hey, you know, it's funny. Because it's kind of different doing shows, because I do a lot of shows with AP, who's an atheist, or more accurately, an agnostic at this point. But whenever, like right there, when you said heretical Christian sex, AP would have gone, you would have got this grin on his face, because it sounds like sex.
Oh, yeah. I remember we did that joke with Muhammad as well, because we portray him as juvenile.
Oh, I forgot about that. Sex?
We kept saying it again and again and again.
Yeah. Sex.
But here's what's interesting. And, Brother Rashid, who you've worked with, he's pointed this out before in his cohorts. I don't know all the guys he works with their name, but they pointed this out, and it's a good point, that Islam contradicts Gnosticism. So he's drawing from the sources, which at fundamental levels are different than what he teaches overall. For example, this idea of the physical world, having illusory components or being decidedly wicked or bad. Surah 575, I mean, this is one of the, arguments against the deity of Jesus. The Messiah, son of Mary, was no other than a messenger, messengers, the like of whom had passed away before him. And his mother was a saintly woman, and they both used to eat earthly food. Just making the point of, first of all, the Gnostic Jesus wouldn't rely on food because he's like almost too divine. That's one reality of this Gnostic Jesus. But also, even just the whole structure of the Quranic worldview, with the paradise being very physical, it's different than the overall Gnostic worldview. And yet they're incorporating these sources almost without understanding the philosophical background that directly collides with standard understandings of the cosmos. When I say cosmos, I'm talking sort of the philosophical, metaphysical cosmos of Islam. But nonetheless, there are Gnostic sources in the Quran. A couple of main areas: Mary and the birth of Christ, sort of these nativity elements. Young Jesus, you'll see that with the birds. Denial of crucifixion, that's a big one that most people know. So let's start with the first one, David. Mary and the birth of Christ. Let's talk about it here. Surah 344. Now, this one is I'm starting off with one that's more difficult to detect, primarily because of the language. But when you look at different translations and understand the commentary, you'll see, oh, this is it. Surah 344, this is the tidings of things hidden. We reveal it unto thee, Muhammad. Thou wast not present with them when they threw their pens to know which of them should be the guardian of Mary, nor wast thou present with them when they quarreled thereupon. So the idea here is, hey, Muhammad, you weren't there, but we've been hooking you up with this knowledge, this information, right? And here's one of the examples, Muhammad. We told you about how Mary was selected by Joseph. Now, that's the background context of the story from the sources, to be the guardian of Mary, and how there's some argumentation about it. We told you that, even though you weren't there for that. Now, everyone was like, wait, when did that happen? Well, it didn't happen in proper Christian history, which is recording what really happened in the life of Jesus, but it did happen in Gnostic sources. I don't know, David, you want to comment on Surah 344 before I move on to the Gnostic background?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that as far as the translation there, this usually gets translated in two different ways. Some will translate it as pens, and some will translate it as arrows. But it's a similar idea either way.
I was trying to let yourself be seen when you're talking.
If I wanted myself to be seen, I'd put myself up on the screen. I go like this. Watch this. Oh, see what I did there? Pow, there's me.
Well, you should do that. Just when hit the button real quick so people can see
good.
you, man.
They don't need to see me. They can hear me. That's all they need.
Okay.
They'll get what I give them. All right.
Okay, I guess so. Well, this is kind of like this, as I mentioned before, this is like a little aside. It's almost like it's taking a break to directly address Muhammad himself. It says, hey, you weren't with them at the time of the story, but how'd you know? Because, we told you. And this appears in other places in the Quran, 1149, 12102, 2844. Right, you'll see it. So,
hey! Since I know where you're going with this, I'm just looking at the various translations, and so you have pens, you have arrows, you have reeds, and the Sale translation even has rods, and some will just say lots. But notice that you're all talking about some sort of straight thing, like a pen, a rod, a reed, an arrow, something like that. But yeah, that they would use for casting lots right there. And so you have it right here, Surah 3, verse 44. But go ahead.
So there, you have this little weird detail about casting their pens, or as you mentioned, it is translated differently, but it's not in any gospel account, but it does resemble a detail from an apocryphal work that does seem to have Gnostic influence. The Proto-Gospel of James, sometimes called the Proto-Evangelion of James, has different names. That's usually what it's sometimes even called, the Gospel of James sometimes. And there, in this whole account, it's interesting also that the angel's speech omits certain things that are in Luke, but that's neither here nor there. Now, continuing on here from Surah 344, you go to the Gospel of James, chapter 9. Joseph, throwing away his axe, went out to meet them, and when they had assembled, they went away to the high priest, taking with them their rods, as you mentioned. And he, taking the rods of all of them, entered into the temple and prayed. And having ended his prayer, he took the rods and came out and gave them to them. But there was no sign in them. And Joseph took his rod last, and behold, a dove came out of the rod and flew upon Joseph's head. And the priest said to Joseph, thou hast been chosen by lot to take into thy keeping the virgin of the Lord. Now, David, I don't know if you know, just a little drive-by here. There are actually Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox who appeal to this story for some of their perpetual virginity of Mary stuff, which I think is problematic. Now, there's a great article on this that gets way more detailed. I'm going to recommend Surah Miriam, The Curse of the Apocrypha by Masoud Masahin, and he talks about this in great detail, I think, and it's very helpful. because this whole story, it has a weird background in general, where you've got Mary being raised in the temple and all of this kind of stuff, and then she's a certain age, which is like 12 or 13, kind of old for one of Muhammad's gals. And then Joseph kind of gets stuck with her, but doesn't really want to be with her because it's the Lot situation. Well, in Surah 344, right there, it's referencing that story as if it's something that really happened, but it's from this apocryphal work that has Gnostic influence in it. This is probably the least offensive in a way out of these, but nonetheless, I want to whet the appetite. Going on to the second one, David, unless you have something.
No. So guys, just notice the parallel. You've got a story in a source that we couldn't seriously take as historical. And then you have the Quran treating it as just a known fact. Why? Because there were people in Arabia who were circulating this story. It ends up in the Quran, in a sort of watered down, condensed version. And where does it come from? Where does it get this? So you look at the story and you say, wow, that's the same story that's in the Gospel of James. And is it a coincidence? So if you're a Muslim, you have to, of course, again, either believe that it's an authentic story, which just happens to, it just so happens no one in the first century mentions this story, and it's only comes about later and then ends up in the Quran. So you have to say, oh, well, it was still true. And just conveniently, these later sources somehow, someone somehow magically recalled that this story actually took place, and then it ended up in the Quran. Or you could just say that the Quran is appealing to the story, but doesn't actually believe that it happened. But you've got some problems no matter what you do with this, especially if this were the only one. I'll say it again. If this were the only example, we could cut them some slack. When the Quran does this over and over and over again, I'd say you got a pretty big problem, because there's this thing, ladies and gentlemen, called inference to the best explanation. You say, what's the best explanation for Muhammad, a guy who's repeatedly accused of plagiarizing earlier stories? What's the best explanation for this guy constantly claiming to have received revelations that we can trace to apocryphal and heretical later sources? I would say that the best explanation is that he was actually plagiarizing stories from people, as he is repeatedly accused of in the Quran. The alternatives that you have as a Muslim are somehow all of these stories, even though they're found in late apocryphal and heretical sources, somehow those late apocryphal heretical sources got all these stories right. That's why they ended up in the Quran. You've got that. Or you can just say, no, the Quran isn't taking them seriously. Allah's just appealing to the stories to make some sort of moral point, but he doesn't believe they actually happened. Something along those lines. But go ahead.
Yeah, Yusuf Ali's commentary on this is kind of interesting. He seems to affirm like this. He affirms some things here, and it's interesting to read. And then he says this. Muhammad was born to sweep away the corruption of the Church of Christ. And it talks about reed means al-kalam, which is something he brings out in his notation there. When you understand, guys, that this Gospel of James, or the Proto-Evangelium of James, it's a 2nd century infancy gospel. It talks about how, Mary had some kind of miraculous conception, but it gets into perpetual virginity. It's the earliest surviving example of it. It talks about how she grew up, her marriage to Joseph, how they went to Bethlehem. It gets into the birth of Jesus and events after that. And it was written around 145 or so. It's known by Clement of Alexandria. It's known by Origen. The author claims to be James, the brother of Jesus, but obviously James, the brother of Jesus, was dead by 145. And it's not as Gnostic as some of the other ones, but nonetheless problematic and ahistorical. So we move on now. The second example.
One second, because I'm just looking up the background there. So Gospel of James, 2nd century infancy gospel, telling of the miraculous conception of the Virgin Mary, her upbringing and marriage to Joseph, the journey of the couple to Bethlehem, the birth of Jesus, and events immediately following. It is the earliest surviving assertion of the perpetual virginity of Mary, meaning her virginity not just prior to the birth of Jesus, but during and afterwards. And despite being condemned by Pope Innocent I in 405 and rejected by the Galatian decree around 500, became a widely influential source for Mariology. But interesting, early studies assumed a Jewish milieu, largely because of its frequent use and knowledge of the Septuagint, so the Greek translation of the Jewish scriptures. Further investigation demonstrated that it misunderstands and or misrepresents many Jewish practices. And so definitely doesn't look like this second half of the second century, basically mid-second century book where someone's obviously not familiar with Jewish practices actually came from a disciple of Jesus or anyone connected to them.
Yeah, and there's a scholar, David Hunter, who wrote in the Journal of Early Christian Studies. He believes it derives from a sect, and you can read some of this. This is linked in even the Wikipedia entry, so you can see this and track down these things, called the Encratites, and who apparently thought that sex and marriage were problems that had to do with what that came derived from sin, and that's an example where you can see, like in the Bible, where they're like, these people forbid to marry. So this is an ascetic sect, and they may have even been corrected, or at least people that influenced them in 1 Timothy 4. But that could get speculative. But Irenaeus mentions them as well as other Christian apologists later. And so this is less Gnostic than some of the other documents we're going to look at. It tends to be more Hebraic, and part of that, I think, is because it's earlier. But let's continue on and look at the next one. Young Jesus making clay birds. And this was also portrayed in the movie The Young Messiah, which attempted to be sort of an orthodox portrayal of Jesus as a young man. But then what you had is him making clay birds in The Young Messiah. And also in the Book of Clarence. That movie also portrayed Jesus making the clay birds and clapping, and then they go away. Well, where else is that? Infancy Gospel of Thomas, section 2. Having made some soft clay, he fashioned out of it 12 sparrows. And it was a Sabbath when he did these things. There was also many other children playing with him. And a certain Jew, seeing what Jesus was doing, playing on the Sabbath, went off immediately and said to his father Joseph, "Behold, thy son is at the stream and has taken clay and made of it 12 birds and has profaned the Sabbath." Interesting there, because you have even Jesus when he's young apparently get in trouble on the Sabbath, right? You see what I'm saying? He just can't stay out of trouble regarding the Sabbath. Well, here's what happens. Continuing on from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, section 2. And Joseph, coming to the place and seeing, cried out to him, that's being Jesus, young Jesus, saying, "Wherefore dost thou on the Sabbath what it is not lawful to do?" And Jesus clapped his hands and cried out to the sparrows and said to them, "Off you go." And the sparrows flew and went off crying. The Jews, seeing this, were amazed and went away and reported to their chief men what they had seen Jesus doing. Now, another problem with this, obviously, is, doesn't John say that the first miracle of Jesus was at the wedding in Cana with the wine and the water? Yeah. So here you have in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas this. Now, what is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas? Well, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is an apocryphal gospel work about the childhood of Jesus, usually dated to late 2nd century, written in Greek. Notice that, all these are in some other, they're not, you have people sometimes trying to act like these are almost more Hebraic. Even the Gospel of James, even that one is in, let me just make sure, that's probably originally Greek and located from Syria. Some people say that one may have been originally in Hebrew. It's interesting, that one. But definitely not the case with the rest of these. So you got the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. And this is another example where what the Gnostic Gospels do, and David, they really tip their hand with this. They fill in the blanks of the Gospels. So everyone should understand, because when you watch Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code movie with Tom Hanks, or hear somebody putting forth those kinds of ideas, they'll act like these Gnostic Gospels are the real deal. We got the ripoffs, something like that, right? Well, hold on now. It's interesting to note where the Gnostic Gospels take place. They take place in Jesus' childhood. Now, why would that be, David Wood? Because Jesus' childhood is a blank spot in the Gospels. So what they're doing is saying, aha, here's a place for us to get in where we fit in. Understand? So what they do is they put information that's Gnostic-like in the places where the gospel doesn't have a lot of detail, because the child of Jesus is not the most important thing about him, so they get in there. Also, it probably can gain some popularity because there's a natural curiosity about what Jesus was like when he was a youngster. They do the same thing on the other end. The 40 days in between the resurrection and the ascension, a lot of the Gnostic Gospels take place in that time window. Why is that? It's a blank spot in the gospel, so they get in there. That shows, by the way, they are derivative of the Gospels. I hope that makes sense to people. They should really understand that important point. I know that's relevant because Muhammad is incorporating these clearly fraudulent pseudepigraphal documents, and it's something that he's saying is from God. Now, where's the incorporation? Surah 349. And make him a messenger to the children of Israel, who will say, indeed, I have come to you with a sign from your Lord, and that I design for you from clay that which is like the form of a bird. Then I breathe into it, and it becomes a bird by permission of Allah. And I cure the blind and the leper, and I give life to the dead by permission of Allah. And I inform you of what you eat and what you store in your houses, indeed, and that it is a sign for you, if you are believers. Surah 349 specifically has this idea that Jesus took clay birds and turned them into living birds here, right there. By the way, that sounds like an act of creation. But it's by permission of Allah, so I guess we're okay, right, David?
Yeah, that's a common thing when the Quran is copying early stories. Lots of those stories have implications for the deity of Christ, and so you'll just find it always being added. Oh, and this is just by permission of Allah. This is just by permission of Allah, because guys, here in the Quran you have Jesus creating in the same way that Allah creates man. Right? So Allah creates man, he fashions him out of clay, then breathes into him and creates. He fashions a man out of clay and then breathes into him, and then the man becomes a living man. And here you have Jesus doing the same thing in the Quran with birds. He creates a bird out of clay, breathes into it, and then it becomes a living bird. So Jesus is creating the exact same way that Allah creates, but it's just by permission of Allah. And sort of an ongoing problem with this, because a Muslim will say, well, it says right there, he's doing it by permission of Allah. Okay, what's the point? What's the point? Why would Allah have Jesus create in the exact same way that only God creates? Why would Allah have Jesus do that? Why would Allah have Jesus, a mere human being, create in the same way that only God creates, by creating something by fashioning something out of clay and then breathing into it? Why would he do that? All a Muslim can say is, well, Allah knows best. But the point is, Allah keeps doing things that are going to cause people to think that Jesus is divine. So, Jesus in the Quran is called the Word of Allah. Jesus is called in the Quran a spirit from Allah. And those are different from other human beings. According to the Quran, when Allah wants to create something, he just says, be, and it is. But Jesus is the Word of Allah. So it's something that Allah speaks. And Jesus is a spirit from Allah. So a spirit is something that Allah breathes out. So it originates from within Allah. So why does Jesus have these titles when other prophets don't? Not even Muhammad has these titles. So you have that. You have the virgin birth. Why is Jesus the one who's born of a virgin? Here you have Jesus creating in the same way that Allah creates. Jesus lives the most miraculous life in history when Allah can't give Muhammad any miracle other than the Quran itself. So the real puzzle here, and I think I should probably make a video specifically on this issue. Does Allah know that all these special features that he's giving to Jesus are going to cause people to worship Jesus? In other words, you can't blame some later Christians for inventing the idea that Jesus is divine. You have to blame Allah. You have to blame Allah. Allah's the one who's causing Jesus to be so radically different from everyone else that people start bowing down and worshiping him. But here again, you have Allah having Jesus create in the same way Allah creates. And somehow Allah is surprised that people start worshiping Jesus when he creates in the same way Jesus creates. Anyway, it's a puzzle for our Muslim friends. Why is Allah, if Allah's goal is to keep people away from shirk, why does he make it so that people can't avoid shirk when they're dealing with Jesus? Why does he do that? I wonder.
Questions for Allah. Well, that's not the only one either, of course. You've also got baby Jesus. So this isn't youth Jesus. This is baby Jesus speaking from the cradle. And where else is that? Because it's going to be in the Quran, but it's also in the Arabic infancy gospel. This is a different work than the prior one. The other one is supposed to be the infancy gospel of Thomas. This one is the Syriac or Arabic infancy gospel. It has two different names you'll see it under. Sometimes it has a fuller name, which will be something like the Arabic gospel of the infancy of the Savior, where you'll see you'll see various names like that. Now, there's only two surviving manuscripts of this, 1299 AD and another one from the 15th, 16th century in Arabic. And apparently they were copied in the area of northern Iraq. Now, I bring that up, David. There's a reason why I bring that up. Because there are Muslims who sometimes will say, this is after the Quran. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're plagiarizing Muhammad.
Yeah, so then you get that. But it should be understood that there's knowledge and information about this prior to it. And just because the earliest copy is from them doesn't mean that that's when it existed. But I believe that that's what you will commonly get if someone watches this. They don't even know these are after the Quran. But when you look at this, for example, you'll see in just common sources, you'll see this thing is probably around as early as the 6th century. And it's funny because it itself it's almost like the proto-Quran. What I mean is it has parts of the infancy gospel of Thomas in it, parts of the gospel of James, and parts of the gospel of pseudo-Matthew in it, according to the scholars who do the critical research on this, right? And so there you understand that you're like, okay, this is like a compilation of Gnostic tales prior to it, this Syriac or Arabic infancy gospel. And yet it's in the Quran. So look at this. We find what follows in the book of Joseph, the high priest, who lived in the time of Christ. Some say that he is Caiaphas. He has said that Jesus spoke, and indeed, when he was lying in his cradle, said to Mary, his mother, I am Jesus, the Son of God, the Logos, whom thou hast brought forth, as the angel Gabriel announced to thee. And my Father has sent me for the salvation of the world. So that's what you see in the Arabic infancy gospel, chapter 1, Jesus speaking with the cradle. Well, it shows up in Surah 346. So you also look at this and you compare the left and the right, and this is the small one. There's a larger portion I'm going to show the baby talk is in as well. This is just a passing reference, Surah 346. He shall preach to men in his cradle and in the prime of manhood and shall lead a righteous life. So there you have this idea of, Jesus talking from the cradle.
Yeah. Also notice, because we already mentioned this earlier, that the Quran is drawing on sources which repeatedly refer to or imply the deity of Christ. And so the Quran has to downgrade all those things. So yeah, he does this thing that is a clear sign of his divinity, giving life to clay birds and creating the same way God does. But it's just by the leave of Allah. It's just by Allah's having him do it. Why? For no reason apparently. Just the only reason apparently is to give people the misconception that Jesus is God. But here, notice what Jesus says in the Arabic infancy gospel. Mary, I am Jesus, the Son of God. That word. So here you have Jesus is the Son of God, and he's that word which thou didst bring forth according to the declaration of the angel Gabriel to thee. So he's called the Son of God. So yeah, the Quran is going to have to say something else that's not Son of God, although it's clear that the Quran did run with the part about Jesus being the word of Allah. Muhammad just had no clue what that's referring to.
Right. So he's editing these legends he's hearing. Now, this one in particular, this Arabic or Syriac infancy gospel, is really wild. It has an account of a diaper that heals people. One of Jesus's diapers. He's got the sweat from Jesus turning into balm. It cures leprosy, and then can dye cloth
powerful
all these different colors like a tie-dye shirt, but only uses one color of dye.
You see
now you
all see the power.
Well, you know what's interesting about the Syriac or Arabic infancy gospel as well? It says that Jesus had earlier encounters with Judas there, and also with the thieves. This is all kinds of interesting stuff here. And it's found in the Quran. So let's look here and let's take a look at what we're talking about in the more detailed account, David, Surah 19. All right. Oh, sister of Aaron.
Wait, sister of who?
Yeah, don't you know that Mary had a brother named Aaron? Duh.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's just a euphemistic way to refer to a Hebrew woman. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah. We can never find another example of it except the Quran, but yeah.
Do people know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do because we talk about it pretty regularly. But if anyone doesn't know, according to the Quran, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the sister of Aaron and Moses. Why? Because those of you who are at all familiar with the Old Testament know that Miriam was the sister of Aaron and Moses, but in the Quran, they're both Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses, are both Miriam, would both be Miriam in Arabic. And the Quran refers to Mary, the mother of Jesus, as sister of Aaron and as daughter of Imran. Imran is the Arabic version of Amram, who, of course, is the father of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And so the Quran, that's multiple ways that the Quran is clearly indicating that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses, and the daughter of Amram. And so the Quran, the author of the Quran thinks that they're the same woman because they have the same name in Arabic, even though they're about 14 centuries apart.
Yeah, and with this one in particular, this is one that if, say, a Dawa guy does a review of this show, I imagine he would harp especially on the later, post-Quranic date of the earliest manuscripts of this. And they would be right about that as far as the manuscript itself. And they would probably focus on that. But we're telling you that right now. And one thing that's interesting about this, and some people have written about this, for example, you can see Gabriel Reynolds' entry in the Wiley Blackwell Handbook of the Quran. He points out that if these are oral stories circulating, it wouldn't necessarily be the case that they would be written down soon either. And isn't this something that sounds exactly like some of the other infancy gospels and things we've read? You know what I mean? So I would say the money is on that, especially when you have sort of the serial plagiarism from these legends happening in the Quran.
Yeah, I'm looking up here. It says, although this gospel is thought to have originated from Syriac sources dating back to the 5th or 6th century, it has become known to European readers by way of an Arabic version published by Henry Syke in 1697, together with a Latin translation. So, yes, we don't have most ancient writings. So we don't have like an early Syriac copy of this. We've got later versions, but it's clear to scholars that this goes back to a pretty early source. So here it says 5th or 6th century Syriac source, which would fit in perfectly with the material that Muhammad is around Muhammad in 7th century Arabia.
Right. And so, you look at this, we haven't even read it because we got caught up on the sister of Aaron thing, which obviously is problematic. So we continue on with this. Here's what it says in Surah 19, 28 through 34. O sister of Aaron, so they're addressing Mary, thy father was not a wicked man, nor was thy mother a harlot. So, they're kind of like, why are you pregnant, girl? Then she pointed to him. They said, how can we talk to one who was a child in the cradle? So she's like, hey, baby Jesus will be my defense. Oh, sorry. Ignore those. That's an article I brought up. I got it back on the screen. And he said, so she points to baby Jesus in the cradle, right? And then they say, well, how can we talk to one who's a child in the cradle? And then here's what he says, David. I am indeed a servant of Allah. He has given me the book.
Hey, did you catch it?
Yep.
Did you catch it? So what did he say in the original? Hey, I'm the son of God.
Right here.
I'm Jesus, the son of God. And
it's on the
what
screen.
Does he say? What does the Quran have it? I'm a servant of Allah. So same story, Jesus speaking as a baby. They just change it from, hey, I'm the son of God to I'm a servant of Allah.
And I think that also clearly shows that it's derivative because it's remixing it. Mm-hmm. It seems pretty obvious that it's remixing it there, right? He has given me the book and has made me a prophet. And has made me blessed wheresoever I may be. I guess that includes in the cradle. And has enjoined upon me prayer and almsgiving so long as I remain alive. And has made me dutiful toward her who bore me. And hath not made me arrogant, unblessed. Peace on me the day I was born and the day I die. And the day I shall be raised alive. Such was Jesus, son of Mary. This is a statement of the truth concerning which they doubt. So, the day he dies, huh, David?
Yep.
The day he dies.
Pretty weird. Peace on me the day I was born, and the day I die, and the day I shall be raised alive. So notice the pattern right there, ladies and gentlemen, in the Quran that Jesus, speaking as a baby, says is going to be his pattern. He was born, and then he's going to die, and then he's going to be raised alive. If you go with the standard Muslim interpretation of the Quran, that what that should say is, peace on me the day I was born, and on the day that people think I die, and then, of course, the day that I'll be raised up without dying, and then the day that I return and judge the world, and then I'm going to die after that, and then I'll be raised to life. So that's what he should have said, but that's we'll save that for later.
Yep. Exactly. Now, we're moving on to a big one, David. This is the one that a lot of Christians may be familiar with. It's the denial of the crucifixion. And before we get into the sources for the denial of the crucifixion, I want to read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 19 through 25. Listen to what it says very carefully. So understand, this is the word of God. The Apostle Paul is writing. This is very important. Listen to what he says. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. So if you're dying in your sin, hearing about this cross, silly to you. That's important. Listen, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Amen. For it is written, this is from the Old Testament, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and I will thwart the cleverness of the intelligent. So there you have the Apostle Paul saying, this is God's wisdom, not man's wisdom. And the cross destroys all pretense of human wisdom. Continuing on, where is the wise man? Where is the expert in the Mosaic law? Where is the debater of this age? Has God not made the wisdom of the world foolish? For since in the wisdom of God, the world by its wisdom did not know God. So notice this is also explicitly against what would become foundational or foundational to what will become Gnosticism. I'm not saying Paul is dealing with Gnosticism here. I don't think it was in bloom enough for him to deal with it properly. But the foundation of it, that we can know these truths that can only be revealed to us by human wisdom alone, a very Greek idea, a very sort of philosophical idea filled with hubris based upon human intellect and understanding. He's denying that. For since in the wisdom of God, the world by its wisdom did not know God, God was pleased to save those who believe by the foolishness of preaching. For Jews demand miraculous signs, and Greeks ask for wisdom. Again, you can see the impetus already present in the culture that would become Gnosticism. And then you understand why Gnosticism was such a powerful threat to early Christianity, because it utilized current prevailing Greek pop culture philosophy, and people were attracted to that, and it latched on to Christianity, promoting these very Greek philosophical Neoplatonic ideas. And Paul is dealing with sort of the foundation of that way back here in 1 Corinthians. And again, this ends up, this denial of the cross and seeing it as foolishness, in the pages of the Quran. For Jews demand miraculous signs, and Greeks ask for wisdom, but we preach about a crucified Christ, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to point out, guys, this is an important takeaway here as far as what Paul. It's like, it's not a prophecy. He's just telling you something about the Greeks, that these guys are focused on wisdom and knowledge. You're going and preaching, hey, there's a miracle that's happened, and they're looking for like wisdom and special knowledge and stuff. And what is it from the Greek world that eventually leads to Gnosticism? It's this. It's exactly this.
Yes.
Yes. So it's I don't know. It's very interesting. It's like you could read this and say, okay, well, if this is right, what are we going to end up with in the 2nd century when the message of the cross goes out into the Greek world? Well, these guys are going to be looking for some special wisdom and knowledge to get out of it, and so on. It's exactly what happens.
You could, because of the advent of Islam, you could substitute the word Muslim in here. Watch this, David. Watch this. We preach about a crucified Christ, a stumbling block to Muslims and foolishness to Muslims. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here it is in the Quran, 4:157. They did not kill him, and they did not crucify him. Rather, it only appeared so to them. I believe it's 100 and, what is it, 40? I think it's 40, I'm sorry, 40 words in Arabic, I believe. Those 40 words right there. And you've got a fundamental denial of the gospel right there from the Quran in Arabic on your screen. Now, how does this show up in the understanding of Muslim exegetes? Now, there's not universal agreement on this. David, I'll let you talk about this. I just wanted to share one first, though. From the Lives of the Prophets, Al-Thalibi. No, my pronunciation is not good. Please don't crucify me, not even in the Dacitic way. He died in 1035 AD. He's a Sunni exegete. And listen to this. And that's a page from one of the copies of this. When he who was like Jesus was crucified, there came Mary, the mother of Jesus, and a woman for whom he had prayed and whom he had cured of devils, weeping over the crucified one. But Jesus came to them and said, "For whom are you weeping?" "For you," they answered. "But God has raised me up, and nothing but good has befallen me." This person was but a likeness for them. So this is a Sunni exegete commentating on this idea that is found in the Quran. And what he says is interesting because you're going to see this show up in the Gnostic sources. I don't know if you want to comment on that. We're going to get more into it.
Yeah, it's the Muslim commentators were clearly influenced by a Gnostic or Docetist version of what happened at the crucifixion. And so the real question is whether that's what the Quran was saying. If that's what the Quran is saying, which is what the vast majority of Muslims believe, the vast majority of Muslims believe in some version of substitution theory. The vast majority of Muslims believe that someone else was put on the cross, that God miraculously disguised someone else to make him look like Jesus, and that this other person was crucified in Jesus' place. And if that is what the Quran is saying, then it's clear that the author of the Quran was massively influenced to this view by Gnostic or Docetist stories. And what's interesting is the Gnostics, Docetists, they had a completely different reason for denying the crucifixion. I'm sure you're gonna get into that. But so you have other Muslims. So Ismaili Shia Muslims, they don't believe that the Quran is denying the crucifixion. You have always had a Muslim minority position that says the Quran isn't denying the crucifixion, that instead the Quran is responding to some claims of Jews who are attacking Christianity. And so the alternative theory basically is that when the Quran says they didn't kill him, nor did they crucify him, it's not saying that Jesus wasn't killed and wasn't crucified. It's saying something along the lines of Jews thought they had ended Jesus, but in reality, Allah just raised him up. And so, and you have other passages of the Quran, like saying that when Muslims killed people in the Battle of Badr, you have Allah saying it wasn't you who killed them, it was Allah. So even though you went out and stabbed them, it was actually Allah working through you. You were fulfilling Allah's plan. And so there have been Muslims, and there are Muslims in the world today who interpret what the Quran is saying there is, no, you Jews didn't do this to Jesus. Allah was doing this through you, and you didn't get the victory over Jesus because Allah raised him up. So there are Muslims who interpret it that way. With that said, the dominant position in Islam has always been some version of substitution theory. And so the question for Muslims is, when did this Gnostic view get into Islam? When did Islam accept the Gnostic view? If you believe that it was at the level of the Quran, so the Quran is actually proclaiming a story that we know came from Gnostic and Docetist sources, then the Quran is copying complete nonsense. So that's one option. The other option, and if I were a Muslim, you Muslims are watching, I would go in this direction. I would say, no, the Ismailis are right. The Quran isn't denying the crucifixion and death of Jesus. That's just how some Muslims interpreted it, and other Muslims were influenced by Gnostic teachings, and they thought that's what the Quran was saying. They thought that the Quran is actually denying the crucifixion of Jesus. I'd say that because, gosh, the standard Islamic narrative on this is so embarrassingly bad. Not only are you taking a story from Gnostic sources that have no connection to reality, you also have Allah being portrayed as this cosmic trickster who deceives people for no reason into believing that Jesus died by crucifixion, thus leading to Christianity. So let me tie this in with what I was saying earlier. Why is Allah causing Jesus to create in the same way that only Allah creates? Wouldn't he know that people are going to conclude that he's divine? If so, why is he doing that? If Allah's main obsession is avoiding shirk, why does he have Jesus do things repeatedly that are going to cause people to commit shirk and associate Jesus as a partner with Allah? Why? Why would Allah do that? So that's one question. But the follow-up is, why is Allah tricking people into believing that Jesus died by crucifixion? Doesn't he know that this is going to become the foundation of Christianity? That this is going to become foundational to Christianity? So anyway, the point here is, if what Muslims are saying is, if the Muslim view is correct, that Jesus didn't die by crucifixion, he didn't die, he wasn't crucified, none of that happened, this was Allah tricking everyone, and you believe that Allah gave Jesus these miracles that would cause people to worship him, then when you're saying that Christianity was corrupted, you Muslims who are watching, when you say Christianity was corrupted, stop blaming the Apostle Paul. Stop saying nonsense about the Council of Nicaea. If you want to say that someone derailed the message of Jesus and caused the origin of Christianity, blame Allah. According to you and your Quran, where did Jesus followers get the idea that he's divine? From Allah, giving Jesus all these unique features that make him completely different from every human being who's ever lived. So blame Allah. Don't blame the Apostle Paul. Don't blame some later Christian. Blame Allah. And when you say, where did Christianity get these ideas about Jesus dying on the cross and so on? Where did we get that idea? We didn't get that from the Apostle Paul. We didn't get that from the Council of Nicaea. We got that from Allah, according to you. So if you want to say that someone completely corrupted Jesus' message and twisted it into something else, blame your God for doing it. And then the obvious question would be, why is Allah corrupting Jesus' message and causing people to believe all these things that go completely against Islam? Why is he doing that? And explain it. At the end of the day, you're just going to have to say something like, Allah likes tricking people, or he likes misleading people, or something like that. In which case, once you've absorbed that idea, you have the follow-up question: Muslims, how do you know if you're dealing with a cosmic trickster who deceives people for no reason, makes them believe false things, and deceives people even through his own prophets? Once you've absorbed that idea, and that's the God you believe in, how do you know he's not deceiving you through Muhammad? How do you know that Islam isn't one massive deception to lead people astray? I'd like to know, because there is no good answer from your perspective. Once you've absorbed the idea, and by the way, vocab, we've talked about this various points in the past, but Abu Bakr, the first of the rightly guided caliphs, once said, if he had 1 foot in paradise, he would still fear Allah's deception. Because he believed that he was dealing with a cosmic trickster. Why? Because he'd seen it happen. He'd seen Allah give Muhammad a dream telling them, go out and fight. You're going to completely outnumber these guys. And they go out and fight, and then they find out they're the ones who are completely outnumbered. And then Allah says, yeah, I knew if I told you the reality that you're going to be outnumbered, that you wouldn't go out and fight. So I deceived you. I tricked you through Muhammad. So this is Abu Bakr believing that he was deceived through his own prophet. Once you've absorbed the idea that God tricks you into believing false things through even his prophets, you don't know what to believe at any point in life. And so you tie all this together, you're dealing with a cosmic trickster who sounds more like Loki than like the God that is proclaimed in the Bible, and just wild, wild stuff.
Yes, exactly right. And we have some problems with this. And, you know, when you look at the Docetists, one of the scriptures they would twist to try to have Jesus being like a human was actually Philippians 2. And I don't feel like we have time to go into it now, and it's a little bit off topic to an extent, but that's something they would twist. They would twist Philippians 2, 5-8, the Carmen Christi. But I want to bring us back before we look at an expanded denial of the crucifixion. I want to look right here at the cross from Scripture, from the same book we read earlier, 1 Corinthians chapter 2 here. Listen to this, what Apostle Paul says. Now we do speak wisdom among the mature, but not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are perishing. So he's explaining that it's not like we're ignorant or dumb or stupid, denying that valuable. It's just that it's not worldly wisdom. It's wisdom from God that the mature understand, who are perishing. Instead, we speak the wisdom of God, hidden in a mystery, mysterion. That means something concealed previously in some way that has now been revealed, but it was there all along, usually in regards to Old Testament revelation, that God determined before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood it. It's almost like, to everyone watching, the cross was God's sneak attack. Now, he had planned it, but they didn't know what was going on. If they had known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. There, right there, in a nutshell, is the paradox of Christianity. The crucified Lord of glory. Only a Christian could write that. But just as it is written, things that no eye has seen or ear heard or mind imagined are the things God has prepared for those who love him. God has revealed these to us by the Spirit, for the Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. It's saying to understand the truthfulness of the message of the cross requires spiritual work from the Holy Spirit. But when we look at Surah 4, 157 through 158, what does it say? Now, this is an expansion of the previous denial we talked about. And they're saying, surely we have killed the Messiah, Isa, son of Maryam, the apostle of Allah. And they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them so like Isa. And most surely those who differ therein are only in a doubt about it. They have no knowledge respecting it, but only follow a conjecture. And they killed him not for sure. Nay, Allah took him up to himself, and Allah is mighty wise. Now, what I point out about this to people is, you have the Quran accusing the people who believe in the crucifixion as being filled with conjecture and stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Who's the one with the conjecture? It's you guys, because you tell us we don't know who was crucified. We don't know who was up there. We don't know really what happened. But maybe it was Judas. Maybe it was a Roman guard. Maybe it was Thomas's twin. There's so many options, right?
No, it is. It's. I mean, think about this. So you have Muslims who believe that Jesus was crucified, right? The Ismailis believe that basically as a sect. The Ahmadis believe that Jesus. So Ismailis believe Jesus was crucified and he died and then he was raised up. Ahmadis believe that Jesus was nailed to a cross, but Allah miraculously preserved him and then Jesus survived and, of course, moved to India. Mm-hmm. Most Muslims believe that in some version of substitution theory, but you can go to 10 different Muslim commentaries and get 10 different explanations of what happened. Yeah, it could be that Allah took one of the guards who came to get Jesus and disguised him. It could be Judas. Someone disguised him. So you basically have two different categories of the substitution theory. You have the volunteer versions of the story, where Jesus says, hey guys, they're coming to get me. Who's going to take my place? I'll guarantee you paradise. And then someone's like, I'll do it. If I'm being guaranteed paradise, I'll take your place. And then Jesus says, okay, you're it. And then God miraculously disguises that person. And that person is crucified because Jesus is scared and doesn't want to be crucified. So that's the volunteer versions of the story. You also have the punishment versions. So that'll be like God punishes Judas or, again, one of the soldiers who are coming to get Jesus and so on. But God punishes someone. But the idea is, if these guys, if you go to 10 different commentaries and they give you 10 different explanations of what happened, and they give different names for the person who was crucified and so on, it's clear that they're making stuff up. It's clear that the later Muslims and the commentators felt totally free to fabricate stories. And now Muslims are looking back at this, and Muslims have no clue, absolutely no clue what happened. They just know what they heard from their leader, or they heard from Zakir Naik or something like that. But if you try to figure out a source, you have nothing that is a reliable source that tells you what happened. And so you have all these different views in Islam, ranging from Jesus was actually crucified and died and rose, to no, Jesus, he was nailed to a cross, but he survived, to someone volunteered to take Jesus' place, or someone was being punished. And who was punished? Well, it could be this guy or that guy or that guy. And we're the ones that the Quran says don't know what we're talking about. We are only following conjecture, when literally the entire Muslim community is following conjecture of one form or another. The entire Ummah. Show me a Muslim who isn't following some form of conjecture on this point.
Yeah, no doubt. I do want to point out some comments in the live chat, David.
Oh, yeah?
Some great comments. You got some really perceptive people here.
That's how we roll.
I just yeah, but wait until I read it. I'm sorry. So here, AF says, I miss AP too, but this is a nice change. Shout out to AF. And then Modus Prime says, you and AP need to take notes. We getting pictures, easy to read text, soft backgrounds. Get your acts together.
Nice.
And then Zane says, yeah, AP and DW been serving noodles. Vocab comes in here with the steak. Woo! All right.
Nice.
No, those weren't super chats, but they were still super comments.
Yeah.
All right,
Notice everyone that vocab immediately goes right for the comments that glorify him.
well, there are so many to choose from, David. I just
I get it.
picked
I get it.
some.
Yeah.
Here.
No, that's fine.
So here's the Hilali Khan. It's more expansive from the same passage. I just want people to get the sense of what this is saying here in the Quran. And because of their saying and boast, we killed Messiah, Isa, Jesus, son of Maryam, the messenger of Allah, but they killed him not, nor crucified him. But the resemblance of Isa was put over another man, and they killed that man. And those who differ therein are full of doubts. They have no certain knowledge. They follow nothing but conjecture. For surely they killed him not, but Allah raised him up with his body and soul unto himself, and he is in the heavens, and Allah is ever powerful, all wise. Now let's look at some other translations. The one in the top, these are non-Islamic translations, so I'm telling you, don't worry, we're going to look at Muslim translations as well of this same verse. Sale says he was represented by one in his likeness. Baal, and the dates are on the screen for these translators, but he was counterfeited for them. Arbery, only a likeness of that was shown to them. Jones, but it was made to seem so to them. That really gets at the ascetic nature of this, by the way, but it was made to seem so to them because Docetism comes from a Greek word, dokeia, which means to seem to be like. Now we look at Muslim translators. This is Maulvi Muhammad Ali, 1951, when he died, so I'm giving you the sort of era of these. But the matter was made dubious to them. Yusuf Ali, but so it was made to appear to them. Pickthall, but appeared so unto them. Abdel Halim, though it was made to appear like that to them. And Bakthir, but a likeness was shown to them. So it is really what it's saying, everybody. Well, where's it from? Before I look at that, because this is the most in-depth one, David. Someone brought this up earlier. Before I look at the Gnostic source, I want to look at Irenaeus in Against Heresies, Book 1, Chapter 24, Section 4, talking about this. And this is regarding Basilides. This is a heretic who was prior to Irenaeus, but he wrote about him, and he's explaining his beliefs. Listen to this, David. This is Irenaeus writing about a Gnostic teacher prior to him. Listen to him explain these beliefs. This is fascinating. He did not himself suffer death. But Simon, a certain man of Cyrene, being compelled, bore the cross in his stead, so that this latter, being transfigured by him, that he might be thought to be Jesus, was crucified through ignorance and error, while Jesus himself received the form of Simon, and standing by, laughed at him. For since he was in incorporeal power, and the nous, mind, that's Greek word for mind, of the unborn Father, he transfigured himself as he pleased, and thus ascended to him who had sent him, deriding them, inasmuch as he could not be laid hold of, and was invisible to all. So there, Irenaeus is describing the Gnostic transforming Jesus. You see that?
Yep.
Now, he continues on here, describing the heretics' beliefs, because Irenaeus was a heresiologist, an apologist to specialize in these heretics and had polemics against them. But the Father without birth and without name, perceiving that they would be destroyed, sent his own first begotten nous, he it is who is called Christ, to bestow deliverance on them that believe in him from the power of those that made the world. So Irenaeus is accurately describing the Gnostic impulse to want to be free from the material world by belief in this Gnostic Christ. Understand? He appeared then on earth as a man to the nations of these powers and wrought miracles, wherefore he did not himself suffer death. I mean, my goodness, some of this shows up in the Quran, doesn't it? Can I show you another one, David? So that's Irenaeus describing their beliefs.
One second, I just wanted to point out, Shabir Ali in his debates brings this up. He says, and the way he tells it is, there were even early Christians who thought that that perhaps people accidentally crucified Simon of Cyrene. And he says, so this shows that even the early Christians were in doubt about Jesus' crucifixion.
Right.
And he, of course, leaves out the part where, no, there was a reason that they were forced, that some people were forced by their theology to deny the crucifixion of Jesus, and it's not something that can help Islam.
Yeah, I mean, the worldview is contra Islam. Fascinating. I mean, I could see somebody really being deceptive and being like, look, Irenaeus, he didn't think Jesus was crucified, because he's describing someone else's beliefs.
Yeah.
Now we look at the second treatise of the Great
Shabir's too smart to do something like that. But yeah, one of the regular Dawa guys, they would look
Right.
at that and go, oh, look, it said right there, Jesus, he wasn't even crucified yet.
Oh, that sounds like Ali Nawa, I see.
Yeah.
So now we move on to the second treatise of Great Seth. This is a Gnostic text as well. And it's part of the Nag Hammadi library. At some point, I need to stop and explain what the Nag Hammadi library is. Right now, I want to get through this. This is the second little tractate in Codex 7. And it's in Coptic, but usually they think it came from a Greek original. And this one is preserved entirely. It's clear. And likely Alexandrian provenance. That means Egyptian origin, around 200 AD. And when you look at this, it presents this docetic crucified Jesus. And I want to read this and explain how this shows up in the Quran. Here's the second treatise of Great Seth from the Nag Hammadi, which is a Gnostic library. I was not affected at all. Yet I did not die in solid reality, but in what appears, in order that I not be put to shame by them. That's interesting. Another, their father, was the one who drank the gall and the vinegar. It was not I. This is Jesus talking, by the way. Another was the one who lifted up the cross on his shoulder, who was Simon. So this is like the Shaggy song. It wasn't me.
Wasn't me.
Another was the one on whom they put the crown of thorns. But I was
vocab.
Oh, yeah.
Before I forget, we should make an entire parody rap. It wasn't me. And it's just Jesus giving all the alternative theories of what happened to him according to Islam.
It wasn't me. Yeah.
It wasn't me.
He'll be like a phantasm Jesus, like ethereal and glowy. You know what I mean? Because he's got to be docetic, right? Because the Docetists basically did present Jesus as a phantasm in many of the texts. He's got to be like that, like the Star Wars hologram, Obi-Wan type of Jesus. And he's like, it wasn't me.
Yeah, and then we're going to need the chorus. We'll have to figure it out and stuff like that, but...
Yeah. Up on the cross, it wasn't me. With the crown, it wasn't me. But I was rejoicing in the height over all the riches of the archons and the offspring of their error and their conceit. By the way, what he's saying there, Jesus, is when he talks about the offspring of their error and their conceit, he's talking about the physical world, understand? And I was laughing at their ignorance. And there you see the contrast between the ignorant people who don't get it and the Gnostics who are the exclusive wise club. Continuing on with the Gnostic second treatise of Great Seth, I visited a bodily dwelling. Now, talk about destroying the incarnation. David, in the Quran, it likes to destroy, denigrate, right? Downgrade the incarnation in a different way. But it's interesting. That's always an interest of the devil, is to destroy the incarnation. And this one, they've got Jesus saying, I visited a bodily dwelling. I cast out the one who was in it previously, and I went in. What? War of the Worlds, invasion of the body snatchers? Whoa. And the whole multitude of the archons was disturbed. And all the physical matter of the archons, along with the powers born of the earth, began to tremble when it saw the likeness of the image, since it was mixed. This weird hybrid of pure kind of mental energy and wisdom, phantasm Jesus guy, and some kind of physical element. They're like, what is this? We ain't ever seen this before. And I was the one who was in it, not resembling the one who was in it previously, for he was a worldly man. But I am from above the heavens. I did not refuse them on the one hand, and I became the Christ. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as a side point, yes, we are attacking the Quran's veracity here. No doubt about that. But we're also exposing the lie of these Gnostic texts to you. Just sit back and relax and ask yourself, does this sound like it's based in history? Does this sound anything like the historical accounts of the Gospels, which are entirely sober and grounded in reality and real events and happenings that even get mentioned by Josephus and Tacitus and Suetonius and on and on and on? No, it doesn't, because it ain't. So when you get someone, well, these Gnostic, they have an equal claim to being valid. You Christians are so mean, and stomp them out. You destroyed the diversity of early Christianity, and now we're stuck with you conservatives who vote pro-life. That's kind of the trail of how it goes, by the way.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, this is common in the Gnostic sources. Like, it was crazy when they came out with that lost gospel of Judas, and like, it's this it's this
word
big thing.
salad.
Yeah, and you open it up, and it's like, and I, through the pleroma of the archons, visited the 17th emanation. I was like, this sounds like a first century Jew writing this to you guys. Like this, right here, and the archons of this and that. And it's like, this sounds like a Jewish carpenter saying this, guys.
Hey, Handy Tool Boy, great point. He says, this sounds like bad fanfic. You nailed it.
Exactly.
Effective reading and writing says Gnostic seems silly and diluted. Exactly.
Yeah, it's actually funny, because the Gnostic stuff sounds like messed up fan fiction, but the Quran also sounds like messed up fan fiction. In fact, that guy, what's his name, Musa Sarantonio, he was a convert to Islam, and he was a recruiter for jihadis in Australia. He got locked up, but apparently he's one of those guys that can learn languages almost like very, very quickly. Like, he could pick up languages, which is why, like, people were saying like his Arabic was perfect and stuff. Like, shortly after converting, he's like speaking fluent Arabic and so on. But he learned like Aramaic and stuff like that. And then he was reading the legends of Alexander the Great in Aramaic and Syriac and stuff like that. He was like, it sounds exactly what the Quran says. And he left it. He left Islam, and he called the Quran, the story of Alexander the Great, he called it 7th century Alexander the Great fan fiction. And it's just funny. As far as the other comments here, Tim Chapman says Vocab has a voice for radio. I would say he has a face for radio too. But
I got the body for radio. Amadeus. Yeah, body for radio. Amadeus and Jungahart have a great comment. She called me Mr. Boom Gnostic.
Nice.
Not hey, how about this? She called me Mr. Boom Gnostic, not murderer.
She called me Mr. Lava.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, JD says, wish we could see your faces. That's what I was telling David. I was trying to set up in the show. I was like, yo, we need to have our faces. He's like, no, don't worry about it. But all right, let me get through these and we'll try to get our faces on the screen. Now let's go to the Coptic Apocalypse of Peter. Powerful. The Coptic Apocalypse of Peter, sometimes called the Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter, and sometimes it's even called the Revelation of Peter. This one is originally in Greek and probably composed around 200 BC, maybe as early as 180 AD, and is said to have circulated in Arabia during the time of Muhammad, most likely in Syriac. But here's the Gnostic or Coptic Apocalypse of Peter. There's a little picture of it actually on the screen. Now I'm going to read from it, and you kind of say, okay. Even if you weren't sure about some of the other ones or had doubts, I mean, now do you have any doubts? I hope not. Look at this. Yeah, look at this. I saw him, Jesus, seemingly being seized by them. And I said, what do I see, O Lord? That it is you yourself whom they take, and that you are grasping me? Or who is this one glad and laughing on the tree? And is it another one whose feet and hands they are striking? Notice how the whole point of the Peter character is just to lead the witness, as it were, into a Gnostic answer, right? That's a common device used for the disciples. They're essentially personality-less, just setting up questions, Gnostic softballs, as it were. The Savior said to me, he whom you saw on the tree, glad and laughing, this is the living Jesus. But this one into whose hands and feet they drive the nails is his fleshly part, which is the substitute being put to shame, the one who came into being in his likeness. But look at him and me. How sorry. People, hey, do you really wonder, people, why Christians, why our spiritual forefathers and foremothers rejected this nonsense? Are you guys really so confused? Why our spiritual heir, our spiritual predecessors said this is poppycock, this is tripe? It's kind of obvious.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, seriously, that's one. I mean, all the people like Elaine Pagels and stuff like that, and Ehrman, and when they come out and they tell to a popular audience, oh, but there were all these different sources with all these different versions of Jesus, and they make it look like people just picked one and they ignored these serious alternative presentations, when they know this is idiotic nonsense. They know it. They know exactly why Christians would have looked at this and gone, what the heck are you talking about, man? This is complete nonsense, man. This is clearly a bunch of Greek pagan philosophical nonsense that's taking stuff from Christianity and putting it into this. And there's no way that this stuff actually goes back to Jesus. They know that, but they come across as saying that these are like viable alternative versions of Jesus that were just covered up at some point. And it's just, come on, you guys know better. Why are you doing this to a popular audience?
Yeah, continuing on here with the Coptic apocalypse of Peter. I already read that part. Hold on. I got the next text. Here we go. But I, when I had looked, said, Lord, no one is looking at you. Let us flee this place. But he said to me, I have told you, leave the blind alone, and you see how they do not know what they are saying. Sounds kind of like words in the Quran, doesn't it? For the son of their glory instead of my servant, they have put to shame. And I saw someone about to approach us, resembling him, even him who was laughing on the tree. And he was with a Holy Spirit, and he is the Savior. And there was a great ineffable light around them. Oh, and the multitude of ineffable and invisible angels blessing them. Hallelujah. And when I looked at him, hallelujah, and when I looked at him, the one who gives praise was revealed. But we can't stop there. Let's look at the Acts of John. The reason why is because this shows in source after that you have prior existing legends that the Quran incorporated, because this was a common Gnostic thing. We look at the Acts of John from chapter 97. And when he was hung upon the cross on Friday, by the way, this is why when I present this sometimes, David, I say this is a freaky Good Friday. You see what I'm saying? Because Jesus's body is there, but it's switched out with someone else's essence, and he actually left. This is freaky Good Friday. And when he was hung up upon the cross on Friday, Freaky Friday, that is, at the 6th hour of the day, there came darkness over the whole earth, and my Lord stood in the middle of the cave. Uh-oh, now I know why Muhammad liked this story. It's got a cave in it. And gave light to it and said, John. Wait, hold on. You know what? Wait, hold on, David. John, for the people below in Jerusalem, I am being crucified and pierced with lances and reeds and given vinegar and gall to drink. But to you I am speaking, and listen to what I speak. Sorry. And then he also says in the Acts of John, chapter 99 and 101, neither am I he who is upon the cross. And again, he says this, Jesus, of course, I have suffered none of the things which they will say of me. You hear that I have suffered, yet I have suffered not. They say that I was pierced, but I was not wounded, that I was hanged, but I was not hanged, that blood flowed from me, yet it did not flow. And in a word, those things that they say of me, I did not endure. Now here's the question. Doesn't John specifically say blood and water flowed? This is a denial of the eyewitness account of the Gospel of John. And he brings it up again in 1 John because early Docetists were popping up. You guys see this? This is literally a denial. Not only that, I was pierced, but I wasn't. I was not wounded. That's a denial of the suffering servant prophecy in Isaiah 53. You guys see this in this Acts of John. And then, I wasn't hanged. Well, Paul says he who was hung on a tree became a curse. Guys, are you seeing this? Now, what is the Acts of John? Supposedly a collection of short stories about John, the apostle, the revelator. They say 2nd century AD, and there's these little translations that circulated around of it, and you get nonsense like this with this Docetic, Gnostic Jesus. Now, come on, guys. This ends up. And I just want to give a real quick shout out. This is my last slide, actually. I know the article I mentioned earlier on Answering Islam was kind of long. This is kind of a more quicker article for you to read. The Quran, the Crucifixion of the Gnostics by Luke Wayne. It's got some good stuff in it, some of which we've covered here today. And so that's the end of my part of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, David, and
right.
just enjoy the applause that I'm here.
I'll get us back here. And I have to say, those Gnostic and Docetist sources, they're stupid, pretty bad. I like Emily's comment here. She says, "Oh, there's so many problems with this, but to the naive and uninformed, this would sound so profound, right?" Isn't that the case? Right. If you heard all this Gnostic stuff and you didn't know anything and you didn't know about anything about history or anything, you'd be listening to this going, wow, it's so profound and so profound, which is exactly what it would have sounded like to later 2nd century, 3rd century Greeks who were seeking wisdom and special enlightenment through special knowledge and so on. They'd have been like, ooh, this is so deep. This is so powerful. And yet it's completely moronic. It's pretty bad.
And that is the same thing that does show up in lots of other religions, David. For example, we mentioned in the beginning of the show, the 5%ers, this secret wisdom and knowledge to conquer the reality that you supposedly see in front of you is exactly the kind of stuff they were on.
And guys, we want everyone needs to understand the fundamental problem with the Islamic view being a copy of a Gnostic or Docetist view, which is that they were coming from the exact opposite direction on this issue. So in the first century, a guy named Jesus was crucified by the Romans. He upset a lot of people, and people demanded that he was crucified, and they convinced the Romans to crucify him. This is considered a historical fact by scholars across the board. Doesn't matter. Christian scholars, conservative Christian scholars, liberal Christian scholars, atheist scholars, agnostic scholars, Jewish scholars, even some Muslim scholars. But scholars across the board acknowledge that Jesus' death by crucifixion is a fact of history. Later on, as Christianity is spreading, it's running into Neoplatonism in the Greek world. And the Greeks, they're interested in, they're always looking for some special secret knowledge that only they have access to. And that's when they find out that there are these emanations from the one pure being, let's say God. There's God, and then there's this series of, he sort of cranks out an inferior God, and that inferior God creates emanates an even more inferior God until you end up with a ton of gods of various degrees of being messed up until you get to the one that creates a material world, and he's really, really screwed up. But then you have Jesus. Now, keep in mind, they're taking the idea that Jesus is some special exalted figure, but they have as an idea that matter is evil. This is why vocab's saying this. They don't seem to understand like Old Testament stuff usually. Why? God created everything and then says this is good. So if they believe that Jesus is this person sent to enlighten us and guide people back up through all the different levels and so on, he obviously can't be a real material person because matter is evil. So he must have been someone who kind of shows up, and you can look at their sources, and you can look at some of the Gnostic sources, and it will say Jesus walked around, but he didn't leave footprints. Why? Because he wasn't an actual physical person. He was immaterial. He just appeared as if he was material. Now, the objection that would arise from that position, if you said, hey, Jesus wasn't even a physical person. He wasn't even a real material person, because matter would be evil. Jesus is not evil, and therefore he couldn't have been an actual physical material person. The obvious question that arises if you're trying to incorporate Christian ideas is, how in the name of common sense was that guy crucified if he didn't have a body? How was he crucified, Gnostics? How was he crucified if he didn't have an actual physical body? How is that? In other words, hey, this is a falsification of your stupid position. You're saying our Jesus was not a physical person, and yet Jesus was crucified. That's a big problem for your view. Not so fast, the Gnostics replied. Someone else is disguised and made to look like Jesus, and this other person was actually crucified in his place. So what's the reason for Docetists and Gnostics to come up with the idea of substitution? Someone else is someone else is disguised and made to look like Jesus, and this other person was crucified in Jesus' place. Their reason for making the claim, their reason for inventing this absurd claim, is that Jesus is only divine. He doesn't have a physical body. So if Jesus doesn't have a physical body, and yet people saw him being crucified, how do you explain this? Someone else was crucified in his place. Someone else was crucified. Someone else was made to look like him and crucified in his place. If that is what the Quran, if the Quran is saying that someone else was crucified in Jesus' place, in other words, if this isn't later Muslims misinterpreting what the Quran says, if that is actually the position of the Quran, substitution, Allah miraculously disguised someone else to make him look like Jesus. And we know that substitution theory was invented in order to save a theology where Jesus didn't even have a body. And that was the basis for coming up with the idea. Muslims, if you think that's what the Quran is actually saying, again, inference to the best explanation here. Muhammad has the same idea as the Gnostics as far as Jesus being rescued and someone else is miraculously disguised to make him look like Jesus, and that's what people actually saw. If that's what the Quran is actually saying, as the vast majority of Muslims believe, what's the best explanation from our perspective? If that's what the Quran is saying. If that's what the Quran is saying, then we'd have to say that Muhammad obviously copied Gnostics and Docetists stories while not understanding what the basis of those stories. The basis of the entire substitution theory was Jesus wasn't physical, he was only divine. In Islam, Jesus is physical and he's not divine. And so exact opposite theology. And yet they're taking the same story. And Muhammad is taking a story that was meant for one purpose, and he doesn't understand that this story was made up by people who are trying to explain away the crucifixion because they don't believe Jesus had a body. And then Muhammad takes the same story. Point is, if you want to say, as I pointed out earlier, when we find stories that we can trace back and we know where these stories come from, and then we know they go back to unreliable 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th century sources, and then they end up in the Quran, our inference to the best explanation would be Muhammad's plagiarizing stuff, and he can't tell the difference between a historically reliable story and complete nonsense or fan fiction or something. He can't tell the difference because he's not a historian. He doesn't know any better. But if you're a Muslim, you have to believe that somehow the Quran got it right. The Quran got it right. The Quran got the story right anyway. Or you could think that the Quran is indeed taking false stories, but trying to put a good spin on them. But the mainstream Muslim view would be, no, the Quran is getting these things right. Okay. So what you're saying is the Quran got substitution theory right. Someone else was miraculously disguised to be made to look like Jesus, and this other person was crucified. You say the Quran got that right. Okay. Who came up with that story before Muhammad? Gnostics and Docetists. So where did they get the idea? Well, we know they invented it. They invented it because they believed Jesus is only divine and it didn't have a physical body, and they had to explain it somehow. So they said, someone else was disguised to make him look like Jesus. Okay, guys, what are the odds here that the Quran has the correct story, and it just happens to be the exact same story that we know was totally fabricated for theological reasons? What are the odds here? That a story is completely made up. We know this story was made up. We know exactly why they made it up. And then the same story ends up in the Quran. Why would you conclude that, no, Allah got the story right, even though it's the same story that guys came up and we know it was made up? We know for a fact it was fabricated. We know it. We know why. We know when. We know all of this stuff. What are the odds that, oops, same story in the Quran, but it's true? This is wild stuff, guys. I mean, if you didn't know anything else about Islam except these kinds of problems, that should be enough to realize this is complete nonsense. So, vocab, just very quickly, and then we'll turn to super chats and so on. I just wanted to go back to, and now that we've gone through some examples, just wanted to go back to these criticisms of Muhammad in the Quran. Surah 6, verse 25. Of them are some who pretend to listen to thee, but we have thrown veils on their hearts, so they understand it not, and deafness in their ears. If they saw every one of the signs, not they will believe in them, insomuch that when they come to thee, they but dispute with thee, and the unbelievers say, these are nothing but tales of the ancients. That's how people are reacting to Muhammad's stories. We've heard this stuff before, Muhammad. We've heard this stuff. From who? From Gnostics and Docetists and so on. 831. When our signs are rehearsed to them, they say, we have heard this before. If we wish, we could say words like these. These are nothing but tales of the ancients. Muhammad, if we wanted to copy a bunch of Gnostic nonsense, we could do that too. Why is it so supposed to be impressive that you're doing it? Surah 9, verse 61. Among them are men who molest the prophet and say he is all ear. Muhammad hears all these stories and he believes them, and he passes them off as his own revelations. Say, he listens to what is best for you. He believes in God, has faith in the believers, and is a mercy to those of you who believe. But those who molest the apostle will have a grievous penalty. 16:103. We know indeed that they say it is a man that teaches him. The tongue of him they wickedly point to is notably foreign. Well, this is Arabic, pure and clear. 25:4-5. But the misbelievers say, naught is this but a lie, which he has forged, and others have helped him at it. In truth, it is they who have put forward an iniquity and a falsehood. And they say, tales of the ancients, which he has caused to be written, and they are dictated before him morning and evening. What are Muhammad's contemporaries accusing him of? Saying, Muhammad, we've heard these stories before. We've heard this before. And you walk out and say you got it from Allah. When you're sitting there with guys who are telling you these stories, and then you come out here and say the exact same story, and you say you got it by revelation. Are you kidding us? And I have to say, reading the Quran, it does indeed look like Muhammad just copying a bunch of other stories from other people. Only reasonable explanation of this stuff. All right, vocab.
Yeah, I mean, we're not the first people to point this out. Won't be the last. There's some good information about this online. And, we want to try to be careful, meaning, if it can, some cases are more certain than others and other cases are less certain. But you kind of say, okay, where did this come from? And you look, and in some of these, it's incredibly clear. And yet there it is. And it should be pointed out, just what David pointed out. The people of the day realized this. They knew that. Think about the charges against Jesus in the Gospels. They weren't saying this. What were they saying? Oh, you get your power from the devil, which, by the way, that same charge shows up in the Talmud, calling Jesus a sorcerer. That indicates he was doing something miraculous or supernatural. The question is the source from above or from below, to put it euphemistically. You see what I'm saying? These kind of charges, there's something to it there. Well, what do you see in the Quran? It's included, hey, you're just ripping off old stuff that we've already heard before. And in fact, the one passage I think was interesting where the Quraysh, they're saying, we could do this too if we wanted. We could come up with this stuff.
And they could. Anyone could have just listened to a bunch of stories of the time and said, hey, we came up with it. Hey, this is a revelation.
But one reason I like this too, David, is that regardless of what you walk away and how you think about it. It's helpful to be educated also in the process about the early church and early church history and Gnosticism. So I like this because I feel like this topic does double duty, at least double duty, where we're seeing some of the sources of the Quran and how problematic they are. And, makes you say, I don't know about Muhammad being a prophet, and that's put it mildly. But then you also get to learn something about Gnosticism and the challenge that it presented in the early church and all that kind of stuff. So I really actually like this topic for multiple reasons because of that. And I think it's helpful for Christians, especially to say, okay, I'm understanding this. And it's fascinating, these heresies, for the most part, they had their heyday. And for the most part, they, as far as in the form of Christian Gnosticism, if we're going to use that term, they disappeared. Muhammad, he resurrected them all. So, he resurrected them.
Yeah, it is silly. And guys, just, because Muhammad is talking about people who were real, but then later people made up a bunch of stuff. So later people made up a bunch of stuff about actual historical people. So Jesus was a historical person. Alexander the Great was a historical person. But later people made up all kinds of stuff about Jesus, which we find in the Gnostic sources and so on, made things up about Alexander the Great and so on. But then the Quran actually includes the things that we know were later fabrications. The Alexander romances, which is where you get the stories in the Quran, those were not things that Alexander the Great actually did. This was later, again, fan fiction, right? So guys, to understand what this is like, William Wallace was a person. William Wallace was a person. Then you have things like Braveheart, which is a movie that contains a ton of fictional stuff about William Wallace. Yeah, suppose I write a book and I claim it's a revelation from God, and I say, and they ask thee about William Wallace, say, and William Wallace went out and said unto them, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. And suppose it's just like all my stories that I'm claiming you get by revelation are taken from the movie Braveheart. And it's pointed out that, hey, the writer actually made up a bunch of that stuff. The writer made up a bunch of that stuff. Just imagine that situation. And if you wanted to believe in me, you would have to actually believe that the movie got all these things right, even though the person is literally sitting down writing and making these things up. That's the situation. The Gnostics were making up a bunch of stuff. The authors of the Alexander romances were making up tons of stuff. They were making it up. And the Quran includes the stuff that we know was made up. And Muslims have to say, no, we take it all seriously. Weird stuff. Anyway, Vocab, you said you have to go. So
yeah, my kid, he's done with church. They did a late night youth thing. So I got to go
get him.
Grab
You can't
him
leave
right
your
now.
your kid there, man. Can't leave your kids stranded. Quit being a dirtbag, man. Go get your kid.
But I appreciate everyone, and thank you for giving to the GoFundMe. We got a massive studio upgrade because of it, and so shout out to everybody who participated. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. Catch you later. I'm just gonna hang out and answer some super chats. Catch you later, man.
All right. Peace.
All right. So we've gotten rid of AP, who's just traveling. He'll be back soon. And Vocab. And then there was one, ladies and gentlemen, and then there was one. All right, let's go to super chats. But guys, again, this is another example when I say you don't have to learn everything in Islam. You don't have to be the master of all topics. Learn one thing. This would be a very important thing. This is something that, even though there are lots of us who know some of the details, this is something that still needs to become common knowledge. That only happens when a bunch of people just take some examples. Again, you could do what Vocab's doing there and say, hey, look, the Quran takes this story and it clearly takes it from this completely unreliable source. And you could go around pointing that out. Or just taking Quran verses where Muhammad's repeatedly being accused of plagiarism. I mean, think about that. A lot of these passages in the Quran, it's talking about just 7th century Arabian pagans. And 7th century Arabian pagans were listening to Muhammad's stories going, dude, we know where you copied that from. We know where you got that. You got that from the guy who just told you that. What, you expect us to believe this nonsense as revelations? 7th century pagans spotted this as complete nonsense. And Muslims expect us to take it seriously as revelation from God. Wild, wild stuff. All right. Let's go through some super chats here. My name is Job. Love your videos. D Wood, I'm an I don't know what that is. 14 years old. And your videos help with debates with Muslims and with learning. God bless. Christ is risen. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Job. Yeah, that's why we're here. And that is the main overarching goal, ladies and gentlemen, is for other people to learn this stuff and be able to share it with Muslims. Pearl Davis. I guess that's Pearly Things. Pearl Davis must have wrote the Gospel of Thomas. Oh, yeah, you don't want to be a girl. You don't want to be a woman. And so God has to transform you into a man so that you can be accepted. Yeah, that does sound like something Pearl would like. Vagabond says, been really getting familiar with the word and your videos have been helpful for combating Islam. Was thinking of starting with the Quran/Hadiths to be better at apologetics. Where should I start? Well, Vagabond, I've covered that a lot of times here. I don't recommend starting with the Quran if you're talking about just reading it through. And the reason I say that is the Quran is if a Muslim hears me say that, don't start with the Quran, he'll be like, yes, because David sees it. It's so powerful. No, I've just seen too many people who decide that they want to do apologetics dealing with Islam. They start reading the Quran and they give up and they give up halfway through Surah 2. And they give up after that because they can't get through because it's that bad. And so I don't want people to give up. So I would suggest studying the Quran and the Hadith topically. Pick a topic that you're interested in. Go to a website. You get a book, but I mean, easy to go to the website, Answering Islam, answeringislam.net. Pick a topic you're interested in, and you've got the menu. You've got all the different tabs there. Any topic you're interested in, dealing with apologetics, we've got it over there. Pick a topic you're interested in, study topically. In other words, look up what the Quran verses are on that topic and what the Hadith passages are on that topic. Study that until you learn that topic pretty well, and then pick another topic you're interested in and do it like that. After you've gone through and you've sort of gone through the Quran passages on topics that you're interested in, if a few years down the road you want to read through the entire Quran, there's not much reason to do it other than kind of bragging rights. If someone asks you, hey, have you read the entire Quran? Have you read the Quran? You want to, you probably want to be able to say yes at some point. But seriously, just sitting down and reading the Quran straight through, just going to be honest, is not helpful. It's jumbled. You're not going to remember much. It's completely incoherent. It jumps around from topic to topic. It's completely disorganized. The vast majority of it is just telling everyone they're going to hell and stuff like that for rejecting it and so on. So, yeah, that's what I would recommend. I would recommend picking topics you're interested in, learning those topics, and then at some point down the road, if you want to connect all the dots and read through the entire Quran, then you could do that. Without lies, Islam dies. That's true, but even with lies, Islam still dies. Redeem says, I'm so thankful that you two are doing this teaching. More Christians need to learn about this so they're equipped to contend for the faith. Yeah. And again, that's why there's so much, guys. We've everyone working together. People have done a great job of over time making sure that some things are common knowledge. That's the difficult part. We can say things. It's difficult to get these things to become common knowledge. And once things become common knowledge, that's when you see the dawah change. So dawah 20 years ago, if you said Aisha was 9 years old when Muhammad had sex with her, standard response, you're lying. You're making that up. Why? Because they know 99.99% of people don't know about any of that stuff. And therefore, if you're saying it and a dawah guy's standing there and saying, no, you're lying. Why? Because he knows the listeners don't know what's in the Muslim sources. So he's going to believe. You're going to believe this guy who's criticizing Islam. He's biased. So believe the Muslim guy. Eventually, we just kept over and over again, putting the sources everywhere, putting the sources everywhere, putting the sources everywhere until the dawah guys realized they couldn't lie about it anymore. And what happened then? They started defending it. They had to defend it. And so that happened with that. That happened with the the so-called scientific miracles that happened with the supposed perfect preservation of the Quran. Islam is built on foundations of lies. Islamic dawah props up Islam on pillars of lies. And so you want to, over time, you just want to expose all the lies. And they'll lie about their own lies for a while until it becomes, the sources become common knowledge. So we're in the middle of that right now. We still got lots to learn. The world still has lots to learn about Islam, but we want to expose every dawah lie. And it's become easier and easier over time because we have more people who are interested in it. And so, great, guys, if you want to destroy Islam, you are living right in the middle of the greatest time in history to do that. We're the first generation that has open access to their sources. We're the first generation that has the technology to get the message across to Muslims in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and so on. We have everything we need, so we definitely want to do it. Lloyds of London said, Jesus defeated the Son of God, the devil, and took his place at the right hand of God. Not Jesus is God, and he never held the title of Lord or law. My goodness, what cult are you from, Lloyds of London? You're from some cult. I don't know which one, because there are several cults that have similar teachings like that. So I don't know. Sheikh Mike Wingelinge, peace be upon him, says, hey, D Wood and Fat White AP. It's not, that's pretty rude. Glad Vocab's not here because you would hurt his feelings. It's not a fable. You have recovered the scrolls of Abraham. Alhamdulillah, the real Gnostics were Muslim. Hope it isn't corrupted. That is, and that's exactly what we'd expect from a wingeling. Seem to remember you being asked about looking at a video and joking about not being interested in vegan stuff. Is it the case that you would be open to looking at apologetics videos from followers? It's fine either way. Apologetics videos? Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind. Matter of fact, I wouldn't mind at some point doing like video reviews. In other words, like people are posting videos, just me and AP, or me and someone else just sitting down, watching some videos and giving our thoughts on that stuff. Yeah, totally fine with that stuff. I'm just saying, like if someone's talking about vegan stuff, it's just, there are certain topics we're really not interested in, right? And that's most topics. There are lots of things that lots of people are interested in, and there's some of those are things we're not interested in. In other words, you could pick any person in the world. There's all sorts of stuff that person's not interested in. But there are things we are interested in. So yeah, I wouldn't mind checking some stuff out. Every year, 2 rich goats are chosen to show no one is above the law. One sacrificed to devil, one humiliated, set free in wilderness. It's what kept the peace. That's from the same guy who said that Jesus replaced Satan as the Son of God. Carl says, all those fancy books on your fancy bookshelves have nothing on Sam Shamoun's microwave kitchen background. That's true. Microwave kitchen background is superior. After I built these shelves, so I just went and grabbed some 12-foot long 2x10s, because the room that I built them for, it works here as well, but the room I built them for was 12 feet 6 inches wide. So I was like, ooh, if I could have like 12-foot long shelves that just go completely wall to wall, and I could have them floor to ceiling. Once I built them with my oldest son. So once I built them, I actually wish that I had angled them. Like, in other words, had like 4 or 6 feet in the middle, and then cut out at like a 45-degree angle, the shelves. So it looks like I'm kind of, I don't know. I thought it would look cooler after I made them. But in the future, if I make some more shelves for studio background, I'm going to make them to where the shelves right behind me are flat, but then they cut out at an angle, so it looks cool. Great collab. Infotainment Vocab. Did you do drama in your high school years? Oh gosh, too bad Vocab's not here. I did see Vocab was in what's it called? He was in a rap opera. That was when he was an adult, but he was still way younger. That was a long time ago. But he was in a rap opera. I don't know what he was in school, but we'll have to check that out next time. What's a good resource to learn about Gnostics? I mean, Vocab did put up some books on it and stuff like that, but really, this is all stuff you can look up online nowadays, guys. So you can actually just look up. You can find good articles online about the Gnostics in general, but any particular Gnostic work you want to study, those are all available. You can find all of those. You can find everything in the Nag Hammadi library. You can find it online, and lots of them are pretty short. Lots of the works are pretty short, so it's not difficult to get through. I've read several of them. It's actually, I mean, the closest parable is reading the Quran in terms of just reading this going, what is this? What is this nonsense here? How do you conceal a disguise when you're stripped down to your underwear and beat? Oh, well, it's got to be miraculous. Hence, God is involved in miraculously disguising Jesus. And if that's what the Quran is saying, then that's what the Quran has the same view. And so Allah is a kind of cosmic trickster who spreads false beliefs. Jack says, off topic, Nigerian Perspective sent you an email. Hang on. I do not recall an email from Nigerian Perspective. I don't know if it went into my junk mail. I'm currently looking. I do not see one. I will check junk mail. Oh, yeah, it's in my junk mail. Yes, okay. Nigerian Perspective. Okay, yeah, I'll respond to that. Yeah, thanks. Everyone is asking him yesterday when he'd be doing a stream with you. People really want the collab. Thanks for all you do, D. Wood. Yes, I will get back to him. And yes, I'd be happy to have him on with us or to be on with him. Either one. I'm sure AP will probably be the same. Stella says, I'm horrified to learn the common practice of bestiality in Islam. It is pretty creepy in places like Pakistan. And there's just so many stories. You can look them up. They're pretty gross of like, they'll find out some donkey in an area has a venereal disease or something like that. And they'll look around to see who also needs to be treated. And it'll be like 15 teenage boys in the area. They're all banging the same animal and stuff like that. And yeah, it's pretty darn creepy. Just yesterday, I got to the point in my research where I was confident enough to make my first video critiquing Islam. Oh, that's why you asked. That's why you asked if we'd be willing to check it out. Yeah. Yeah, give us a reminder. Again, AP's not here, so I'd have to verify with him that we want to do that. That would probably be good to like set up a show where we're just going to go through some other people's videos, and maybe we'll go through like 10 different videos on different topics and stuff like that and offer feedback. So yeah, remind me of this when AP is back, and if AP is actually with me, then we could just like pick a day. We could say like, okay, next Sunday we're gonna go through people's videos. So yeah, that's no problem. And did you see that the last Arabic style mosque in China was just modified? Thanks for all your work. Yeah, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but I have seen them modifying mosques in various ways to make them look Chinese, to make them resemble more Chinese architecture and so on. So yeah, interesting things going on out there in China. And finally, from AP's favorite site, Goat Hub Music, stop making fun of my target demographic, Pakistan. Yes, that is the ultimate consumer of all things Goat Hub. That is true. All right, guys. So that's been 3 hours. That's a good length. That's a good length for this live stream in terms of people actually watching it and going through Vocab's presentation and so on. So going to go ahead and end this now before it goes into before it crosses the 3 hour mark. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think AP gets back tomorrow from his trip. I don't know if he'll want to go live or he's going to want to rest or something like that. But we'll find out then. But whatever happens, we'll be back soon covering some awesome stuff. And there is definitely all kinds of stuff going on constantly in the world. We can't even do enough. We can't even do live streams and cover everything that happens every day. It's like, oh, these are the 3 or 4 big topics. Let's pick one, and we can never actually catch up, which is why it's good for other people to get involved in and be making videos and streaming and so on. These are interesting times. All right, guys. So again, big takeaway here. Quran claims to be from Allah. In the Quran itself, Muhammad is repeatedly accused of fabricating revelations and hearing them from other people. We look up examples. We look up examples where we find a story in the Quran and we say, where does this story come from? Because the Quran will be citing the story as if people know about it. The Quran will be citing a story and saying, and they ask you about it, which means people know about it and they're asking Muhammad to see what he thinks about it. And then over and over again, the Quran gives a version of the story which we can trace back and we know where it goes to. And it doesn't go back to something historically reliable. It goes back to something that we know was a fable. And then we look at the Quran and what are people saying about Muhammad's revelations? These are fables. These are tales of the ancients. We could do this too. Any idiot could do what you're doing right now and say it's a revelation. And so that just needs to become common knowledge. So get some of those Quran quotes. Get some of those Quran quotes. Again, I put it on Twitter. There are more, but I put what I could fit in one sort of square. Quran verses, which talk about Muhammad's plagiarizing his revelations. Just take that little screenshot and go around sharing that. If you want to do something cool, think about it. Even learning one example, taking a verse of the Quran or a passage of the Quran and being able to show people where that story came from. That came from this, and putting those things side by side, showing them to your Muslim friends. Very, very powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff. So everyone get on board. Let's all pitch in and expose this religion. One more from Celeria here. Sounds like a plan. I'll do my best to remember. Yeah, just again, next time I'm on with AP, just give us a quick reminder in case I forget. And yeah, would be happy to, because people always recommend videos to us. People always recommend, hey, watch this video, watch that video. It would be good to just have a day where that's just what we do. We just go through a bunch of other people's videos. Happy to do that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.